What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 232. I am Marshall. I am one of your Limited Resources. I've got another one with me, the Brinoceros, Brian Wong. Welcome to the show, Brian.
I'm here to review cards and chew bubblegum, and I'm all out of gum.
Whoa! Jeez. All right, it's set review time. We had our big one last week. That was the commons and uncommons one, but the second half is here. It is the rares and mythics of Journey into Nyx. There's some pretty spicy stuff in this set, and some really subtle but powerful interactions that we're going to be unveiling for you during the course of this show. Before we do, I'd like to take a quick moment here to speak about our sponsor, CardKingdom.com, a great place for you to buy Magic cards. We get a lot of great feedback all the time about people who are happy with the site. That's why we continue to endorse them and to shuttle you in their direction. We wouldn't do it unless we believed in their product, and we do. CardKingdom.com is a great place to buy stuff that you need. You can get sealed product. You can get singles. You can fill out your latest standard deck. Maybe your commander deck needs a few spiced up additions, and you can get all of those there. If you want to buy a box, you can buy a box so you can draft with your friends. There's everything that you could need at Card Kingdom. They have fair prices. They ship very quickly, which is really kind of one of their strongest selling points, I think. And they always stand by their product, which is something that I appreciate as a consumer, because, sometimes things get screwed up, or, something isn't quite the way they wanted it or you wanted it, and they'll take care of it for you. They will make sure that you're happy with your order so that you keep coming back to them over and over again. CardKingdom.com. Brian, we're going to do the same scale as last week.
Yep.
You want to very quickly brush over that one more time, just in case people are popping in the future?
Sure. Yeah, it's an A through F rating. A's are Stone Cold Bombs, cards that win the game when you cast them the vast majority of the time. B's are cards that pull you in the direction of that color. Not necessarily bombs, but really, really solid cards. Pretty decent removal, etc., that kind of thing. C's are probably going to form the core of your deck. It's kind of hard to build a deck without many C's, but they're usually pretty average, fairly interchangeable. D's are cards that I would consider potentially playable, and in maybe the right deck, maybe even, maybe you could run those, but I usually prefer not to play D's. And F's are cards that I don't really see myself ever casting throughout the course of the format.
Exactly. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go through the rares and mythics here in order, but we're going to start with blue. We like to mix up which color we start with just in case, just to keep any biases or time constraints or anything like that evened out a little bit. We try to be pretty even on it anyway, but you know how it goes. So we're going to start with Battlefield Thaumaturge. Now, this is a card that I actually had two of in the pre-release, so I've got some experience with this. It's 1 and a blue for a 2/1 human wizard. It's a rare, and it says, so it says each instant and sorcery spell you cast costs 1 colorless less to cast for each creature it targets.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a very weird thing to get your head around. Now, I'll read the rest of it, and then I'm going to have you explain that, Brian. So it's got heroic. Whenever you target this card, it gains hexproof until end of turn as well, which is kind of the two things aren't necessarily related.
Right. Yeah, I'd say the heroic ability of the thaumaturge is mostly irrelevant. I'd say that the cost reduction is, and just being a 2/1 body for 2 is the main reasons you're putting in your deck.
Exactly. So talk about the cost reduction, because it was really funny. You and I were both at the same pre-release, and I actually ended up with 2 of these, and I was playing, like a blue-black control-ish type deck, and I was like, well, I'm going to run these guys because, it'll occasionally make my Lash of the Whip a little cheaper, and I need some 2-drops, and it's a fine 2-drop to just sort of attack and block early and just sort of fill in my curve. But as you and I looked at my pile of cards, we sort of discovered, wait a second, this is just really good in my deck.
Right, yeah, so it reduces the cost for 1 for each creature that it targets. So if you have spells that target multiple creatures, you can get a huge cost saving. So anything with Strive is going to be a combo with the Thaumaturge, or even some of the older cards in the block, like Sea God's Revenge. You target 3 creatures, only costs 3 mana now. So that's actually a fantastic deal. Any kind of combat trick, casting on your own stuff, any kind of removal, casting on your opponent's stuff, it's just going to give you a bargain regardless.
Which, by the way, I had Sea God's Revenge. I also had one of my favorite cards from this set, we're going to talk about it in here, but yeah, the removal spell that has Strive, and I had some sick scenarios where I had both of these out, and it just gets dumb. Yeah, it just gets really, really dumb. but it was amazing how often those type of things came up. I mean, I could have cast my, what's it called? My Sea God's Revenge for blue.
Oh, with 2 thaumaturges out. Wow.
Yeah. I just been like blue, bounce all 3 of your things, scry 1. It's just insane.
Yeah, I was just thinking, even Dauntless Onslaught now only costs a single white mana. Just, normal tricks that cost 2 now cost 1. It's just so much easier to leave up 1 mana, in combat. Also, it makes it really hard for your opponent to know what tricks you might potentially have.
That part was huge.
Right. It really messes with their mind when it comes to what they have to play around.
Now, where do we grade this guy? I mean, he's also a reasonable body as a 2/1 for 2 mana. He's got some more upside with the heroic ability that will occasionally come into play. But how good his first ability is, the cost reduction ability, is going to depend entirely on, how many cards you have in your deck that can take advantage of it.
Right. I'd say that Thaumaturge is a good card, but, mostly it's just kind of like, a little bit better than average bear.
Okay.
So I don't know. I gave the Thaumaturge a C+, which I think it's like a little bit better than Filter, but, it's not a bomb.
So it's smarter than your average bear is what you're saying.
Indeed.
What grade level did you give it?
I gave it a C+.
Yeah, C+ seems about right. Like it like I'll have to say, like in the deck I had, which was sealed, I would have given it like a B. Maybe even a B+. Like it really did enable me to do a lot of things that I wouldn't been able to do. But I also had 2 of them, and I had a deck pretty uniquely set up to take advantage of it. So I don't think that its average case scenario is going to be that high. And I like C+ for Battlefield Thaumaturge as well.
Yeah, I think you won't always get Sea God's Revenge and Silence the Believers.
Exactly.
But it seems actually really nice in a blue-black control when you can make those expensive removal spells like Sip and Lash cost a little bit less.
I like that. Let's take a look at Daring Thief. It's 2 and a blue for a 2/3 human rogue at rare. And you'll see this pretty often. A lot of the rares and mythic rares will pass the vanilla test on their own. And that's a lot of what bumps them up, because whatever their ability is, ranges from really exciting to pretty good. And that's kind of the difference maker. And this one's no exception. A 2/3 for 3 in blue is perfectly fine. This one has Inspired. Whenever it becomes untapped, you may exchange control of target non-land permanent you control and target permanent an opponent controls that shares a card type with it.
Right. So what you're going to be looking to do with Daring Thief is, somehow find a way to make it attack or tap. Whether it's the same thing you're doing with your other inspired things, but usually like being able to attack with it, using a combat trick or an aqueous form or something like that. Then with the inspired triggers, you either kind of trade your lousy creatures for their good creatures, or something that kind of creative that we talked about in the rules show, which is trading like an enchantment for like an enchantment creature on their side. So you can trade away, some kind of aura, like an Ilea's Presence or an aqueous form or something like that for like, an emissary or like a pretty sweet enchantment creature. And it's a great deal because the aura is still going to stay on the creature. So like who controls it is mostly irrelevant for most of these auras, but, who controls the creature is a big deal. So I think,
that's sweet.
I think putting an aqueous form in Daring Thief is pretty cool. Trade them the aqueous form. However, I think if you attack them, that they actually get to scry, which would start to get weird.
That is weird.
But ultimately you do get a 2/3 for 3, which especially in a blue deck is very, very playable. It's gonna entice your opponent to leave back blockers. If you have like a bounce spell and you can get in, you can really mess with your opponent. I think Daring Thief has a lot of upside. Ultimately I don't think this is a bomb either, so I'd kind of put it somewhere in the B range. I gave Daring Thief a B-.
Yeah, I think B- seems good. I think one of the things that you're going to do pretty often with this card is very straightforward. You're just going to trade creatures, right? You're just going to be like, here, your creature's a little better than mine, or maybe a lot better, or I'll trade you my worst creature for your best creature.
Yeah, and especially
that matters.
Yeah, especially this really synergizes with blue because blue has bounce spells. So you trade them a thing, then bounce that thing back to your hand.
Yeah, you can really get ahead with it. I think Daring Thief is subtly better than it looks. I think this is a really cool implementation of exchanging permanents. I find that the cards that exchange permanents normally, I just find annoying and difficult to work with, and they're just like, what am I supposed to do with this? This one, I think I know what I'm supposed to do with it, and I really like it.
Yeah, I think that the main downside that a lot of them have is they may be very expensive, or they may you might not find a game situation where you want to use it, but this card is just an efficient creature. so you can just start with that. And if the situation comes up, then Yahtzee.
Exactly. Let's take a look at Dictate of Kruphix. It's 1 blue for an enchantment with flash. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card. Now, you know, for those of us who have been playing Magic for a while, we call this a Howling Mine effect because that was the original card that had both players draw extra. This one, a lot of people are calling this the fixed Howling Mine because the downside to Howling Mine was that it was an artifact. You cast it, you send the turn to your opponent, they get to draw an extra card, and then they're up a card before you are, plus you're the one that had to cast Howling Mine, so you're down another card. So it starts to kind of catch up to you quickly. Now, this one allows you to flash it in so that you get to be the first person to draw with it. Does that make it good, though?
I mean, that makes it less bad, but the thing was that, like, Howling Mine wasn't even close to a good card in Limited before.
Yeah.
I just think that it's really hard to imagine a situation where strategically I feel like I can break this synergy, you know, consistently.
What does that scenario look like?
Geez, I don't know. It's just, so, you know, somehow you have to be, your deck wants lots of cards and their deck doesn't. So maybe it's, you know, your deck has a lot of expensive cards and you need more lands, whereas your opponent's extra cards are just, you know, more grizzly bears, that kind of thing.
That could make sense, like against an aggressive deck, if you're just drawing bigger, better stuff later in the game. It's just hard to know that.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see the scenario coming up where this card would be good, but there are going to be a lot of situations where it's not good. I just don't think it's really worth trying to break this. The other thing is, like, it has flash, it's an enchantment, you can trigger Constellation. You know, all these things I think are just too cute. Like, honestly, just this is not really winning Magic. Winning Magic is finding a consistent strategy, and I don't think Dictate of Kruphix really contributes to a consistent strategy.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I mentioned at the top as well is that people always seem to forget that, like, in order for both players to have this privilege of drawing extra cards, you must take one card from your hand and tear it into pieces. Like, you're the one that has to pay for this. Right.
So just compare this card to Divination, which already isn't a great card in Theros block. It's playable, but it to even get to Divination, you have to cast this. 2 more turns have to go by, and you gave your opponent like an additional draw or 2 over the course of that time. So it's just starting off at such a bad place. So I'm never going to cast Dictate of Kruphix. Like, I already know that for a fact. So I give it an F.
Yeah, I'm giving it an F as well. I'm just out on the Dictate. It's a cool card, but it's not a good card.
Yeah, agreed.
How about this next one? This one I think is a good card. It's Hypnotic Siren. The question is how good. It's a 1/1 flying for a blue mana. I mean, right there, I'm not super excited, so we need to know what the other end of it is. If that was all it did, I wouldn't really want to play this card, but it's an enchantment creature, Siren, with Bestow. So it's got 5 blue Bestow. Of course, the creature gets +1/+1 in flying, as you might imagine with Bestow, but it also has an extra little rider here. You control enchanted creature.
This is one of the only Bestow cards that kind of, like, throws you off. Like, you wouldn't necessarily just figure that out, that it does that.
Right.
But yeah, this is the mind control of the format. Mind controls are usually very good.
They're excellent.
So good. They've had to start bumping up the cost now, and 7 mana is kind of the baseline for a mind control.
At Rare.
At Rare, yeah, sure. The really nice thing about this one is that if you need to hardcast it, at least you can get something. So, you know, in the early game, your opponent has like a 3/1 in play and you need to block it. All right, I'll play Hypnotic Siren. Or your opening hand, you have an Ordeal of Perforos. Okay, I'll play Hypnotic Siren, slap down the Ordeal, start attacking, right? Like, you know, I'm not really putting this card in my deck because I want a 1/1 flyer for 1, but the fact that it can be that doesn't make it worse.
No, it doesn't.
You know, you're just going to need that sometimes. So, you know, but just getting the +1/+1 flying and mind control as a bestow, and then if the thing dies, you get the 1/1 flyer, even though you bestow it on your opponent's thing. Like, don't be confused about that either. So, you know, ultimately, like, 7 mana is a lot, but I really, really like the fact that it's a 7-drop that can do something if you need it to do something for less than 7 mana.
And it should be a fairly game-ending effect at 7, right? I mean, if you're,
sure.
You know, mind control traditionally was, you know, it's just a straight-up super clean 2-for-1. You just get it. There's no questions asked. And in this case, it actually is really sweet because it gives a creature +1/+1 and flying in addition to just being able to steal it, which was already kind of good enough. So we've established that we like this card, right? We like the fact that it's a mind control effect, which is just incredibly powerful and limited. We like the fact that it adds a little bit of flexibility by being a 1/1 flyer when you really need it to be. The question, though, is the 7 mana thing. Both you and I are not very high on 7 mana spells in the format. Is gaining control of your opponent's creature enough to get us there?
I think so. I mean, I also just really like the versatility. I don't know. So to me, it all adds up to a nice package. It's going to do something in most games. So I gave Hypnotic Siren a B.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a B as well. If it was 6 mana bestow, it would be up into the A range for me, or B plus range. 7 mana is a lot, but I think it will save you from a lot of games. There's some scenarios where it won't, where they're beating you down and you steal their creature, but it stays tapped, and then they just kill you. So there's still a few corner cases where you get to 7 and it's supposed to stabilize you and it doesn't, but still the powerful effect is powerful.
Yeah, and also consider that this is a block about enchantments. People are more likely to be playing enchantment or removal. So your mind control is more likely to get blown up. But the card, 5 mana steal a creature, the original mind control, that card's like an A+. Like it's like pretty much as good as a limited card can be.
Which is why we don't see it at uncommon anymore. Yeah, so I like B. I like solid B for Hypnotic Siren. I think it's a really nice top end for a blue control deck.
Absolutely.
Polymorphist Rush. This one's interesting as heck. It's 2 and a blue for an instant with Strive. The Strive cost is 1 and a blue, so it costs 1 and a blue more to cast for each target beyond the first. Choose a creature on the battlefield. Any number of target creatures that you control each become a copy of that creature until end of turn. So to break this down, let's say you had 5 mana, and you pay 3 blue total, and you target 2 of your creatures, any 2.
Yep.
Then you're choosing a creature on the battlefield. It doesn't matter which one it is. You're not targeting it. You're just saying, well, that one. And then those 2 creatures that you targeted now become copies of that.
Right. Yep.
At instant speed.
Yeah, and common misconceptions about copying effects is you don't get any other benefits that are on those creatures. So you don't get the benefits of the auras that are on those creatures. You don't get the benefits of like a giant growth that was cast earlier in the turn, that kind of thing. If your creatures that you are making into the copy have things, they will get those benefits. Listen to the rules show if you need that clarified for you. So this card has a lot of stuff going on. It's kind of weird. Like it's kind of hard to figure out what the ideal use of it is. But I think basically what you're kind of doing is a couple things. One is you can use it to just copy like a large flying creature or just a large creature in general and just kind of like fly over and smash your opponent in the face for a lot of damage. Or you can kind of use this on kind of one of your lousy creatures to make it a copy of their awesome creature. And like usually those creatures will now trade in combat. And because it's an instant, it's not too difficult to make that happen. Or you can maybe, if they block correctly, maybe you can totally use this as like a strange kind of pump spell and kind of rejigger which creatures are which and win combat that way. It's going to be hard to make this consistently work, but it is like a powerful effect in the right situation.
Yeah, I think that's a really good sentence to describe Polymorphist Rush because, man, there's a lot of times where this just doesn't do anything.
Sure.
There's times where it's going to win you the game in a game that your opponent probably didn't think that they could lose.
Sure.
There's some weird things that can happen. You can Polymorphist Rush like a heroic creature and then target it, and then it gets to counter anyway, gets to keep it. There's just a bunch of weird interactions with it. Where do you come down, though, on how good is this card?
I think it's definitely playable, but I don't think it's a great card. So I gave Polymorphous Rush a C, which just sounds kind of weird to give it an average grade to a card that is like so potentially powerful, but it's just like so all over the place. I didn't want to go much higher.
Yeah, I think I'm going to give it a C minus. It still has that problem of sometimes you can't cast it. Like it doesn't do anything, right? Not literally can't cast it, but like sometimes it's just going to sit in your hand because you have the 3 best creatures out, or, it's not worth it to spend an entire card to make your second best creature slightly better for the turn or whatever. But I have to respect the upside of the fact that it can turn it can turn losses into wins, and there's not that many cards that can do that, and this one is one that can do it. So that's why it's still on the radar for me.
Sure, yeah.
Sage of Hours is next. This card's interesting. It's 1 and a blue for a mythic rare, human wizard. It's a 1/1 for 2, so blech. But it's got heroic. Whenever you cast a spell that targets it, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on it. And as we've learned throughout Theros block, that ability is quite strong. Mm-hmm. So I'm already, I'm interested. The fact that it's a mythic, though, makes me a lot more interested. So it says it's got an activated ability. Remove all +1/+1 counters from Sage of Hours. For each 5 counters removed this way, take an extra turn after this one.
Okay, I mean, let's be real. Like in limited, we're only achieving that like once in a blue moon, right? Yeah,
getting 5 counters on something is very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, people have like thrown around some combos you can do with a Johnny, the Planeswalker, or Ifara's Enlightenment, maybe. I mean, but really, I mean,
yeah, but we're not from New York. We don't live in magical Christmas land, so
yeah, I'm not going to bank on my Sage of Hours getting me extra turns. And really, if I have a giant creature, I actually probably prefer the extra creature than the extra turn.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to make the extra turn, you had a 6/6.
Right. And somehow that wasn't good enough, and taking an extra turn and maybe just drawing a basic land or whatever is going to be better, like unlikely. So really I'm putting in my deck because I want a 2-mana 1/1 that has a heroic +1/+1 counter. This kind of like falls in like an awkward place, between that new red one, the new 1-mana 1/1, and like Setaessan Oathsworn, which is like a 3-mana 1/1 that gets 2 1/1 counters. So this is like it's overcosted for its core body. It only gets 1 +1/+1 counter. I think that really limits like how good it's going to be, but I do think it's still playable.
Yeah, I think so too. But I just wouldn't. The funny part is, I think one of the best things about it is that it's a lightning rod. Like sure. I think people will overestimate how good it is, and they'll try to kill it, even though like. You might just be like, turn 2, Sage of Hours, go. And they're like, oh, man, Bolt of Keranos.
Right.
And you're like, sweet. Right. Like, it was a 1/1 for 2 and you killed it. Like, I think I can live with that. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, like in the blue-white heroic deck, this guy's making the cut every time just based on his regular ability. So I give him like a C. I think he's fine.
Yeah, I gave it a C-. I think, once you strip away the mythicness and the extra turns thing, which is probably never happening, what you're left with is kind of an overcosted hero, which is not so great.
Yeah. Our last blue rare is a card that I love in concept, and it's got really sweet art too. It's Scourge of Fleets. It's 5 blue for a 6/6 Kraken. When it enters the battlefield, return each creature your opponents control with toughness X or less to its owner's hand, where X is the number of islands you control.
That's a big effect.
It is. We got a chance to really flex this muscle at the pre-release, because if you happen to choose blue, this was your card. So I got to see a lot of these floating around in sealed, though haven't yet in draft. And that's kind of the big question that I have, because as much as I want to just love this card, I love returning stuff to my opponent's hands. I like being paid off for getting to 7 mana. Man, I'm pretty concerned. Like, I'm just really nervous that I'm going to have 4 islands, return 3 of their creatures, but leave like their 2 best creatures sitting on the board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like we said, we've been talking about 7-drops a lot recently, about how it's just they come down. It's like too little, too late frequently. But at least this one does help you stabilize the board somewhat if you're getting overrun. Still, it is just a 6/6 left over, which actually isn't super exciting in Theros. Like with all the Death Touchers running around and all the heroes running around, like this might not even be the biggest thing in play. But ultimately, I think this is an okay 7-drop. I'm not excited about it though. How about you?
I am excited about it, and I also think it's just an okay 7-drop. It's like a card that I really want to make awesome, but it's just not quite there. It's just not quite that. Look, the ultimate would be when Scourge of the Fleets enters a battlefield, return each creature your opponents control. to the hand. Just boom, right? Just get all that. Now, I don't know how good that card is. Like, that card in Theros is sweet, but even then, like, you're going to probably still have some bestow things left over that the Scourge should be bigger than. Like, it changes the board a lot, and that's a card I would be excited to play at least. But I still wouldn't consider it, like, perfect at 7. And this one's, like, pretty far away from that. So I can't in good conscience give it a high grade, especially given its steep mana cost of 7. But I really like it.
I think my ideal Scourge of Fleets deck is a green-blue deck that has a few mana accelerators, and I'm using it more offensively than defensively, where I can use this as a kind of like a tempo play, maybe even on turn 6, get a couple of guys back to their hand, smash now because they can't block as well. I think putting Scourge into a control deck and have this try to like be your finisher, it's not really going to serve that purpose especially well. It's not going to bounce the things you actually want to bounce, which is like a large hero or anything like that. So, yeah, I'm going to play Scourge in green-blue, try to accelerate into it. Hopefully that will swing the game for me.
Yeah, we don't want to get like, we have to make sure that we do respect the fact that this does have a big effect on the game. It's just you and I are both so demanding of 7 drops, and I think appropriately so, that, this is where this thing's going to fall a little bit short. I'm going to give it a C-. Like, I think that if you want a 7 drop, you could do a lot worse than this, but I also feel like you could do a bit better.
Yeah, I gave it a C+, but we'll have to see if it holds up. Many of the 7 drops have not.
It's just because it's 7, man. It's just, I can't imagine feeling really happy about having one of these in my deck. You know what I mean? I just feel like there's going to be other cards that are going to be better than this. But yeah, I do love the card. I think maybe I'll put it in Commander. All right, that moves us over to black, where we have Dictate of Erebos. So this is along the same lines as Dictate of Kruphix, which we've already seen, in that it's a flash enchantment that's sort of an old card redone, and this one costs 3 black for, again, a flash enchantment. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature.
Yeah, so this is a new version of Grave Pact.
Right, Grave Pact.
Right. This is a kind of a cool card to add flash onto. It's going to make that combat step that seemed pretty good for your opponent turn out pretty bad for them. Your creatures were going to trade, and they were going to have a couple big things left over. Flash in your Dictate, now that it wipes their whole board. And going forward, the game's going to get really hard for them to get ahead, because any lousy creature you have is going to be able to at least trade for something that they have.
Exactly.
Still, like, it doesn't do anything by itself. You need to have other creatures in play. You need to have other things dying. If you're just totally getting wrecked in a game, it's really not going to dig you out of that hole. So I think that kind of keeps it out of a bomb range, but does provide a lot of advantage in a long game. And a lot of the black decks are so grindy, green black and white black, that you're kind of angling for a long game with a lot of creatures trading, that I think this is going to have a nice home in a couple different decks.
I think so too. I like what you said. I like the fact that you reminded everybody that this doesn't do anything on its own. Like, you can be like, end step Dictate of Erebos, go. Like,
right.
It doesn't, like, it's not like it doesn't even kill a creature. Like, it doesn't kill one thing, right? You need to have stuff start dying, meaning that maybe they've got a Wingsteed Rider that they've bestowed on once, which happens all the time, right? Or a Necron Skyguard or something like that, and they're hitting you for 3 or 4 in the air or whatever it is. You draw your Dictate of Erebos, and it's like, you got work to do. Like, you need to have something die. They're going to sometimes know that it's there. Sometimes you're going to be able to attack, make them go, sure, I'll trade that. And then you're like, boom, flash in Dictate of Erebos and kind of get them, right? But there's also other times where it's already going to be on the battlefield and they're going to be able to play accordingly. So I think it's still, like you said, I still think it'll have a home, and I think it's powerful enough to get over that hump. But it isn't one of those, we talk about setup cost on the show, and this one has a medium setup cost. Like, it needs other stuff to happen besides just resolving it before you start getting value from it. That said, the upside can be very, very high.
Yeah, and it has the benefit of the cards that it combos with are just creatures, and you're just gonna you're gonna be playing 16, 17, 18 of those in your deck already.
Exactly.
So it's not too hard to get this card going. It's not trivial, but it's gonna come up more often than not.
Agreed.
So
where'd you put it? You give it like a B or something?
Yeah, I gave Dictate of Erebos a B.
Yeah, I think a B is a solid grade for it because it is a little back and forth, but I think you'll know when you have the deck that wants it. What about Doomwake Giant?
All right, Doomwake Giant is an enchantment creature giant for 4 and a black. It's a 4/6, so pretty beefy. And it has Constellation. So whenever Doomwake Giant or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, creatures your opponents control get -1/-1 until end of turn. So, just right off the bat, this is just already like a really big creature for a black deck, a 5-mana 4/6. You would just play that in almost every black deck anyways. But just that when the turn you cast it, you can use it after combat to kind of mop up stuff after you attack them. You can use it to just clean the board of any of those pesky death touch things or 1 toughness stuff on their side of the board. And then going forward, it's kind of hard to use the -1/-1 as a combat trick because most enchantments don't have flash, but it's just really threatening to, like, anytime your opponent's going to block, they need to block much, much bigger if they don't want their creature to die after combat. So it's just a really nice thing going forward, and you may even be able to cast 2 enchantments in a turn or something and just totally wreck them.
Yeah, this card's awesome. I mean, we just talked about setup cost. For the same converted mana cost of 5 and the same color, Doomwake Giant asks a lot less of us than Dictate of Erebos.
Sure.
You just play it. You're just like, boom, here's a 4/6. Get through this. And if you can't, then I'll start attacking you with it. And then randomly you're going to pick off some other stuff or shrink down their team and then attack. I mean, I think that's a big play with this card, right? It's just like you have it out. You've got 3 creatures, this and 2 others or whatever, and they have 3 fine creatures too. You just play an enchantment. You just like, your whole team's tiny, attack you. Like, you don't have good blocks anymore at all, right? And and Doomwake Giant's huge. I mean, it's a 4/6 for 5. Like, green is a little envious of that. Like, that's big. Yeah.
I think also a lot of times when I'm, evaluating stuff on the vanilla test, I actually do consider what colors they're in. And it's just, it's so hard for black to get a creature of this size. Maybe like a Marsh Mist Titan is really the best you can do. But so this thing is really it's gonna serve a role that's hard to find in a black deck. So I give it maybe an extra half a grade for that as well.
Yeah, I love this card. I think it's just all upside, low setup cost, easy to cast. It's 4 and a black. It doesn't even have double black in its casting cost. It might just kill something when it enters the battlefield. Remember, it triggers itself. Like, this card's just awesome.
Yeah, and it really feels like black and white are really 2 colors that are really on the enchantment theme. They really it wouldn't be too hard to build like a constellation type theme deck to take advantage of other synergies as well.
And I like the fact that you're going to be opening this. So, like, if you pack one, pick one Doomwake Giant, you can, use the tiebreakers or skew some things back over to the constellation side of things. Just if you've got sort of 2 tough choices, 2 tough decisions, but one of them's an enchantment, you sort of skew back over to that.
Sure.
I give Doomwake Giant an A-.
All right, I gave it a B+.
Yeah, I'm going big with Doomwake. I think it's really good.
All right, we have Extinguish All Hope next, which is a sorcery for 4 black, so 6 mana. Pretty basic card here. Destroy all non-enchantment creatures. So this is going to be a hard one to evaluate.
This is really hard to evaluate. Yeah,
I did not run the numbers on what percentage of creatures are enchantments and which aren't, but I think it's probably 2/3 aren't.
That's what I would guess. A third aren't, or a third are. Yeah, that sounds about right. Gosh, I don't know, man. This one's just so hard to pin down. The effect is profound.
Sure, absolutely.
I mean, that's a big, board wipey thing, and especially when it can become not, right? Like anytime that a sweeper gets to be semi-targeted, meaning like not targeted, but like where some things are dying and other things aren't, you can often build around so that you take the lesser of it as it goes. But man, you're just not going to know what the heck your opponent's doing.
Right. One of the things I do like about it is that I think all the heroes are not enchantments. So you're always going to kill heroes, and heroes are such a pain in the butt. So I like that about it. I don't know. This is like a potentially devastating card. Like, it's going to wreck green decks a lot of times too. Like a lot of just big green beefy stuff. Centaurs, get out Centaurs, all of you. I mean, this is really powerful. I mean, it's hard to get this. I was high on the 7 mana Wrath from Born of the Gods, which has turned out to be, I think playable, but probably not a particularly good card. I think this is a little bit better just because it costs 6.
Didn't I give that one an F?
I think you may have given it an F.
Yeah, I think I was right.
It's not an F. It's like a C or a C minus. C minus maybe, but
Not this one. I meant the other one.
right. And
No, but we'll have
so
that fight another time.
all right. So I do think Extinguish, costing 1 less mana, and the fact that you can kind of build around it a little bit makes it a little bit better than that too. How do you feel about Extinguish?
I don't like it.
You don't like it at all?
God, no. I just like if I just main deck it, if I'm just running it in the main, if I'm abusing it, meaning that like most of my creatures are enchantment creatures, then I'm good with it. I feel good about it. But that's hard to do, right? I mean, you're going to still have to just take the best creatures out of a pack. You can't just make a whole deck of enchantment creatures. There's not enough of them. And plus, sometimes there's just going to be something way better, right? Like, you know, you get to your Theros pack and you're not going to take some random enchantment creature over, you know, Grey Merchant or, you know, what's it called? The Keepsake Organ or something like that. And so I don't really think that you can have that deck. And this thing varies so much on what it does from board state to board state that it's just too inconsistent for me. Like it's already expensive. Look, 6 mana Wrath is not exciting for me. 7 mana was an F. I gave that an F and I stand by that. And this one is much better than that. 6 is a huge difference, but still I'm just like, that doesn't, man, Wraths cost 4. That's a sweet Wrath effect. You know, Wrath at 4 is awesome in Limited because you can actually get a 2-for-1. And even then, those aren't my favorite type of cards. I just think that they're, you know, rawly powerful in the right scenarios. This one costs 6 and who knows what it's going to do. Like, it might only kill one thing on their side and like one thing on your side. And then you're pretty unhappy. I hate how inconsistent this card is. I can't figure out where I want it. If I'm playing against green, I know I want this card. Like green and white, in a lot of ways, I'm just going to want to be playing Extinguish, I'll hope. But if I'm playing against like black and even some blue, some, you know, it's just like some red cards die to it, some don't. But I feel like the whole red X is going to be faster than Extinguish, I'll hope is going to be anyway. Man, I'm just too nervous to just like throw this in my main deck and hope it all works out.
I like the fact that because it is selective, what you can do is just like, all right, I have a couple enchantment creatures and I have a couple non-enchantment creatures. I'm just going to play my enchantment creatures, then Extinguish, and then cast my non-enchantment creatures, you know?
Yeah, and I like that too.
Yeah.
How often does that come up? I don't know. That's the thing. Like, yeah, I'm not questioning it. I'm just genuinely asking. Like, I don't know.
I'm just saying, like, maybe I'll skip my 5-drop Keepsake and then turn 6 Extinguish, then drop Keepsake next turn.
Yeah, that could come up for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a powerful effect, and 6 mana is more in the realm of possibility. And I think a lot of the aggro decks are mostly non-enchantment creature based, so I think you'll get a little more benefit out of that. So
if you're alive, sure. You know,
I
mean, any aggro deck worth its salt in this format is going to kill you before you get that thing, you know, going.
All right, I already feel like we're going to have a big gulf on this, but I gave Extinguish All Hope a B.
Yeah, we do have a big... I think that you overvalue Wraths in general, and... I mean, I still can't believe that you're even like clinging to anything from Fated Retribution, which was just unplayable. Like, it's just awful. I'm going to give Extinguish All Hope. I'm going to give it a C. And that's a little bit of a cop-out, but that's also what I tend to do when I don't... Like, when I see extreme upside, because this is in the one of the control colors for the format. Right? Like you could set up a board state where this is just ridiculous. And I respect that. But I also can see spots where it's just not that good. And you're going to probably use an early pick on it. And it's a lot of mana and it's a lot of sort of finagling to make it work. So I'm going to give it a C. I predict that there's going to be games where this is the best card in your deck. And there's going to be games where this is like your 22nd best card.
Sure.
Which is... God, that makes me nervous.
So you see, you know, this is not a real possibility, but you see a booster pack and it has Extinguish All Hope and it has Flesh Mad Steed or like Fellhide Minotaur. And you're just like, yeah, Fellhide Minotaur, I'll take that over Extinguish All Hope.
No, I would take Extinguish there.
All right, so then how are you giving it a C when those cards are also C's?
I think it's about the same.
Okay.
You can't compare them directly or at least I can't, because one of them, like they're opposite ends of one spectrum, right? On one end, you have the 2 cards that you named, especially like Fellhide Minotaur. You know exactly what you get with that. And it's not great, but it is there and it does its job, right? On the other end of that spectrum, you have a card that can win you the game on the spot or can be dead in your hand. which is about the biggest range that you can possibly get. And so for me, they probably average out to about the same. Like, Extinguish All Hope is going to win you some amount of games and just lose you other games, where if you go with like Felhide Minotaur, it's just going to kind of be there every time doing what Felhide Minotaur does.
So why are you picking the Extinguish if you think that they're about the same on average?
Well, I mean, there's no difference between the two. I mean,
Okay.
in that case, like, there's no reason not to take Extinguish. The reason I would is because gamble. I mean, like, I want the upside. I want the powerful upside to be available to me in that case. Like,
Okay.
One thing I think that you and I do cross on when it comes to these type of effects is that I respect very high power and uniqueness. And I think that Extinguish All Hope brings both of those. It just doesn't do it consistently, which is okay. Like, I can live with that. It's just, like, I'm not ready to commit to this card as just like a sweet bomb until I actually see it in action, because I can see this card being very mediocre.
Yeah, I think that this is definitely going to be one where we're going to have to play with it a few times to really
I think
know.
so too. I think the one other thing before we go to the next that makes me that's a bit of a difference between the way you and I see this card is I'm not convinced that a 6-mana Wrath is that good in this format. I'm just not. Like, I think that the decks are fast, they're tempo based, they hit you, you Wrath, and they get to knock off maybe a bestow creature, and then they get to be the first one to come back. I feel like 6 mana is too slow. You're going to have to play blockers. Like, you can't just do nothing until turn 6. You can do nothing until turn 4. If you're on the play unlimited, you can just be like, well, I'll take the 7 and then Wrath you and hope that my 3-for-1 is enough to carry me through. But 6 is too much. So you're very rarely getting like a 3-for-1 or a 4-for-1 off of a 6 mana. Just like if it just said destroy all creatures. Mm-hmm. That's really hard to do, and you're going to have to throw some creatures into the mix as well. That said, like I said before, I do respect the fact that it does things that other cards just can't. I mean, it will get you out of jams that other cards just can't. Like, it'll give you a top deck in a situation that there isn't any other card in your deck that can get you out of it.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting because it is going to be a card you can pick up in the first pack, and then you can totally use it to kind of build around me.
And I like that, and that gives me hope, Brian. Let's take a look at this next card. This is a sweet one. It's King Macor the Gold Cursed. Wow, this card's sweet. It's 2 black for a 2/3 legendary creature human at rare. A little below the curve there.
A little bit.
But he's got a nice ability, Inspired. Whenever he becomes untapped, you may exile target creature. Now, there's more text on here, but it's upside. So, like, let's just erase all of that. Like, and just because I'll read it in a second because it's all good for you. But what?
Yeah.
We just exile a creature? It's just gone forever? Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, when Inspired debuted in Born of the Gods, like, I just kind of looked at it and I was like, none of these cards are powerful enough that even make me change like one other thing about my deck.
Right.
Like, it's like, I mean, I'll take the upside when I get it, but I'm not building around it.
Exactly.
And I think finally, like, this King Macor is actually a card that's good enough that I will make conscious decisions to try to maximize my Inspired.
Yeah, and that was something that bore itself out, right? Because, like, what are the better Inspired cards? Like Pheres-band Tromper? Well, that doesn't really ask much of you.
Right.
You know, the cards that just sort of gave you incidental Inspired value were the ones that ended up being the more sought after ones. Now, I'll read the rest of the card. If you do exile a creature with him that way, you get to put a colorless artifact token named Gold onto the battlefield, and it has sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any mana to your mana pool. So you just get like free mana as well.
I want to change the review format for 1 second, and I just want to review the design of this card. Mm-hmm. And I hate the fact that it's May Exile.
Oh, I hate it. I hate that.
Like, how is it a gold curse if you never have to turn yourself into gold or your friends into gold? You only turn enemies into gold. That's not a curse. That's a freaking blessing. That's awesome.
It makes me so mad. It really does. It should absolutely have been a must ability. And I get it that they've got this whole, sort of New World Order look on things where they're trying to make things simpler and less and harder to screw up, but this should have been a must. It just should have been. You got to turn something into gold. This is King Midas. Like, this is the flavor of King Midas, and like that fits that as well.
Right, yeah, it's supposed to be like a power that seems awesome, but is actually like tragic, and it's just that's not how this card works. This card's just awesome.
Yeah. So
all right.
That's a rare flavor rant from Brian and I, but we're both very against the May ability here. So how good is this guy? I mean, he just seems great to me. He needs a little help, right? Like 2/3 for 4 isn't necessarily going to be able to attack, on turn 5 and just assume that he's getting in there or whatever. So you're going to need a trick, right? There's plenty of them that do it. There's Necrobite, your favorite. There's anything, what's it called? A Boon of Erebos. Any removal spell will probably get it done as well, as long as it's instant speed. I mean, you're going to need to give him one little boost,
right,
to get him untapped. And then the game ends. Like if they can't kill him, it's just over.
Yeah. Once it gets going, it's incredibly difficult because if you have a tapped King Macor and they have no creatures in play, if they play a creature, you're going to get untapped and exiled immediately. So it's going to be hard for them to stop that train. They're going to have to play multiple things out that can block and kill it. That's kind of a tall order.
By the way, that situation is so much more interesting if it's a must.
Right. I agree.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll digress.
Even it's just like, they have 2 creatures out. And it's really hard for them to decide to attack with one, because if they attack with one, you have a kill spell for the other one, then you attack with King Macor. Now you've tapped King, and the game is going to spiral out of control for them. So it's just like, even if you don't have anything in hand to get him through, it's like your opponent kind of doesn't want to even bother attacking you. I like that about it. Still like downsides. It only has 3 toughness. It costs 4 mana. It dies to most of the removal spells in the format. It's limited in that way. Not a great blocker if you're just getting completely overwhelmed. So to me that kind of keeps it out of the A range, just from being like, every time you cast it, it's gonna swing the game. But it is a really powerful card, fun card to build around. I gave King Macor a B+.
I also give it a B+. It does have a setup cost to it. And it is a little bit fragile, so we have to keep that in mind. But this is a card that has the capability of taking over the game.
Right. Let's move on to Master of the Feast.
He fat.
This, however, is like an old school Magic design, one you don't see very often. The card with a drawback.
Ah, yes, a drawback.
So this is a demon for 1 black. It's a 5/5 flyer. So this is going to be a pretty substantial drawback.
Yeah.
And it has, at the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent draws a card. So this card seems actually really good to me, because it's just going to kill them so fast that it doesn't even really matter what they drew. Like a 5/5 flyer coming down as early as turn 3, that's like, your opponent is going to have so many cards in their hand at that point in the game anyways, that what's limiting them is their ability to like play lands and just cast their spells. The card advantage you're giving them isn't that big of a deal. Or even in like a really late game situation, it just feels like a 5/5 flyer is going to be able to bring the game home in a turn or 2. So
that is an interesting viewpoint. I thought you were going to say the opposite, because obviously the other side of the coin is, all right, well, you've got the best creature on the battlefield, but they're going to just draw so many cards that they're going to find a way to deal with it, and they're just going to be sitting there with a bunch of cards when they finally kill it. Well, but I think that your side is more correct than that argument. I'm playing devil's advocate here. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is it's 5 toughness. Like, it's really tough to kill.
Oh, I mean, in old Magic, it wouldn't be that hard to deal with this card. But in new Magic, removal spells that can kill a 5/5 flyer are few and far between, or they cost a lot of mana, like 6 mana, right?
Right.
So your turn 3 Master of the Feast might just kill them before they can even get there. Also, because this is Theros block and it's all about Voltrotting a creature up, putting lots of bestows onto it, they've been very hesitant to print any type of pacifism effect. Just one card that just neutralizes a creature and leaves it in play. So there's no pacifism to slap on this Master of the Feast and just make it into a card draw engine, which is the absolute worst case scenario for your Master of the Feast. That's pretty unlikely to happen in Theros.
Yeah, I think there's only a few, right? There's the blue keep it tapped down card, and then there's that new white one. Does that work on Enchanted enchantment creatures?
The one that makes it not... No, that's going to give it double strike.
Okay, or +2/+2 or whatever it was?
Yeah, so the black one would give it +2/+2.
Oh, right, the black one.
What
about the white one?
The white one, because it's an enchantment creature, will give it double strike. So that's out.
So that's out.
Yeah, don't make that mistake. The lightest cards that we're mentioning are hardly even playable.
Interesting. So you're in on this. You're just like, turn 3 Master of the Feast, deal with this.
Yeah, I think Master of the Feast is actually probably actually nearly bomb status. We'll have to see. I mean, even if your opponent just uses like a Voyage's End to bounce your Master of the Feast, it's still a 1-for-1. Like they got up 1 card, but they had to spend a card to keep it out of from attacking them. So they didn't really get ahead. I mean, there was maybe a nice little tempo play for them or something like that, but it's really not card advantage. There's not that many ways to totally work over a Master of the Feast to make it an excruciatingly bad drawback. So I actually think that this card is gonna win the game more often than not. So I gave Master of the Feast a B+. I think it's actually quite good.
All right, I'm gonna give it a B- because I'm just a little nervous still.
It's scary.
I can't come up with an argument against what you're saying, but at the same time, I'm feel this like thing in the back of my head that's just like, God, I'm just going to get destroyed when I play this card. Yeah. Somebody's going to do some stupid thing where they chump for 2 or 3 turns in a row, with some token or some dumb thing I'm not thinking of, and I'm just going to get worked. But I'm not going, I'm going B, I'm going to go with B on this.
All right, I'm going to make a quick tangent. So cards like this that have huge upside but huge drawbacks, I actually really like them if my deck is just really bad, because it's like, well, if everything works out, I can just win the game. So like Mirrodin Block, original Mirrodin Block had this card called Eater of Days. It's like a 4 mana, it's like a 9 power flyer, it's like huge. And when it comes into play, your opponent gets 2 extra turns, which is awful. But if your opponent doesn't kill it in those 2 extra turns, then you're just going to smash them and they're dead. So if my decks were awesome, I just wouldn't play it. But if my decks were garbage, slam that in the deck and it gives me an avenue to victory. And I think Master of the Feast kind of works like that. But I actually think because of how the removal is in the format, more often than not, it's going to stick around and probably kill them.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's interesting. I can't wait to see how that one actually pans out now. This next one is a lot simpler. It's Silence of the Believers. Mm-hmm. I was lucky enough to get this thing, and it is ridiculous. Silence of the Believers is 2 black for an instant at rare. It has Strive for 2 and a black, and it says exile any number of target creatures and all auras attached to them.
Wow, I can't believe you get the auras too.
That is so sick.
That's brutal.
It is just dumb. I mean, I got... Yeah. Like I said, the deck I had was a control deck, and so I was able to get to 7 mana, or in my case, sometimes I had 2 thaumaturges out, and it was black.
Right.
It was black to exile a creature and all its auras, and then black to do it to another one. It's just absurd. But anyway, even under normal circumstances, you can work your way up to 7 mana and just destroy them. I mean, you can get a 3-for-1 pretty easily off of this if you can get to that point. They'll usually have something with some bestow or aura on it or whatever, and then some random other creature. Even then, though, just play it at 4 mana and just destroy your opponent with it. Like, it's so nasty.
Yeah, when I was grading this card, I didn't even realize that it exiled the auras as well. That is so brutal. So just even just a 4 mana kill spell is pretty much good in every situation that you can be in. It's an instant, so you might be like even bait them into casting a combat trick. But then the fact that if you draw it in a later game situation where you actually have 7 mana, it's just game over. You get to kill their best 2 things. That's really almost impossible to come back from. There's no time when Silence of the Believers is not a good Magic card. Essentially, I don't know. How is this card not an A?
It's an A.
All right, can it be an A+?
It can be.
It's not GT.
I'm giving it an A. Yeah, I mean right. Any card with the potential this high for a 2-for-1 is going to get an A, especially because it's unconditional and it's instant speed. It's just a wrecking ball. But yeah, like Jitte takes over the entire game. Baneslayer Angel takes over the entire game. Like, I give this an A.
Yeah, definitely.
Silence the Believers. That is a real Magic card. What about this last one in black? This is. Are we really casting this?
I hope not. So we're looking at Worst Fears. It's a sorcery for 7 and a black, And it has a very powerful line of magic text, which is, you control target player during that player's next turn. And minor rider, exile worst fears. So you can't recur this, but like we're going to do that in limited anyways.
I mean, I was thinking maybe of mnemonic wall in it back, but anyway, sure.
So Mindslaver in its original incarnation costs 6 and then 4 to sacrifice. So you could actually kind of run this out there a little bit earlier in the game more consistently with, a little bit of mana acceleration or that kind of thing. This effect is most powerful if your opponent also has spells in their hand, because you can do gross things on them, like make them use removal on their own creatures, make them cast their auras on your stuff, and then you make them attack their creatures into your creatures, and then you get a block, effectively. It's just like you make them chump attack. It's going to be really hard to get them to cast spells, because once you get to 8 lands, usually people have pretty much empty hands. So, I think it's going to be pretty hard to get too much of a wrecking out of Worst Fears. Usually it's just going to be through creature combat and whatever spell that they do draw that turn. So, I mean, it can break open a creature stalemate, I guess. I don't know. 8 mana is a lot for a card that's not always going to win me the game.
How often would you say it wins you the game?
I mean,
I don't need a percentage, but I mean, is it like, and I don't mean literally win you the game, right, but just does the game end after you cast this like 50% of the time, 75%, 90%? Like how, if you've ever done a Mindslaver Unlimited, like how good is that?
See, I'm a little bit worried, because in a lot of in these creature stalemates, it might just be that you have a bunch of like 1/4 staring at each other or something like that. It's like what is happening in this game that's allowed you to get to 8 mana? Or is it just you kind of been going back and forth killing everybody's creatures, so there's really not much in play? So it's going to be kind of hard to figure out the situation where you've stabilized the game, but you also need this, I guess. It's like, what kind of control deck are you playing? This is not my ideal. This is not my ideal win condition.
Because that's how I'm viewing this card, right? Is that you've put all this effort into making the game go long enough to actually resolve this. What's the payoff? Because I can think of a lot of, Vulpine Goliaths or whatever that clean up the board quite nicely for 6 mana, in at common. This one is an 8 drop. Like what, right. Like this pretty much just has to win me the game to make me happy to play it. And, I've played a little bit of Mindslaver in my day, and there are definitely times where it doesn't.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've had that experience many times. And you need a fairly equal game for this type of effect to swing it in your favor, right? If you're just getting smoked, it's not going to do much. Or if you're already smoking them, this is not really going to even accelerate the process all that much, right? So you need a kind of even game. It's kind of stalled out or whatever, because it costs so much mana. You can't play it early in the game to actually mess up with what their spells are doing. And I think that's a huge drawback to this costing 8. If this card costs like 5, I think it would be like devastating, because you could totally mess them up.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I think that one way to look at this card as well, just worst possible case scenario, is it's still Time Warp.
Right, yeah.
You still just get to basically take another card if your opponent, they do technically draw a card, but I mean, you should be able to find a way to make that irrelevant.
Yeah, it can also just be like the world's most expensive falter effect, because you can just make them attack with everything and then tap all their lands, and then you can attack them back because they're not going to be blockers left.
Yeah, so there's ways to make it work, but I got to say I'm out on Worst Fears. Like this has not convinced me that this is a place I need to put 8 mana.
Yeah, me neither. This could be like a desperation sideboard card in like a blue-black mirror where you're both using like the singer, in like a really grindy game, maybe even then. But I'm probably never casting Worst Fears. I gave it a D-.
I'm giving it a D- as well. I think that's where it should be. 8 mana is just too much, and it's not even that. I mean, look, there's decks that I can build where I can cast this spell. That's sure. Not even. I mean, I've played a Crowan Colossus or Colossus for a Crow or whatever, but I want to win.
Right.
I just want to win that game.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing, is that like on an empty board, it doesn't do anything. On like certain boards, it doesn't do anything. If your opponent has way more stuff than you, it's not going to do anything that special. So I think once you get up into this like 6, 7, 8 mana threshold, like you can just get cards that are way more proactive than this.
Agreed. All right, that's going to be black. Black looks pretty powerful to me.
Yeah, a lot of really good rares.
Yeah, Silence of the Believers I think is the best. King Makar's awesome. Master of the Feast is sweet. Extinguish All Hope is a bit of a question mark, but still we can see that it has raw power level. Doomwake Giant's awesome. Dictate's good. I mean, those are really good. That was all of them.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, they've got some really powerful stuff. Let's take a look at our first red rare. It's Bearer of the Heavens.
So it's going to make a bunch of 2/2s?
No. Oh. I was like, what is he talking about? Are you making a bear pun?
Is it going to make flying 2/2s?
Because it's no. Okay, no. It does cost, however, the same amount converted mana cost as Worst Fears, which is one of my worst fears, playing 8 drops. It's 7 and a red for a giant that's a rare.
Okay.
And it's a 10/10.
That's big.
That's something. When it dies, destroy all permanents at the beginning of the next end step.
All right, this is a Johnny card for Commander or some other type of format.
Yes.
This card in Limited, you can't control it that effectively, right? It's like, what if I didn't want everything to die?
Exactly.
also, it costs 8. So if I'm putting an 8-drop in my deck, it's usually because my deck is more of a control deck, and I want the game to go long, so I can end it with powerful effects, right?
Exactly.
So I get the game to go long, I get my 8-drop off, then my opponent kills it, everything, we're back to square one. It's like now, like that's not the effect I want in my control deck, but you could look at this as like a backup plan in an aggro deck, but it costs 8. I don't want to ever get to 8 mana in my aggro deck, and even then, like, it's not like a guaranteed victory, like it's gonna... I mean, you can't even like hold extra lands in your hand because 8 is so much, it's going to be hard to get there in the first place.
Exactly.
I mean, it is just a 10/10, doesn't have trample. They can just get chump blocked. I don't know. Strategically, I don't really see a lot of benefits to putting this Bearer of Heavens in my deck.
Yeah, I don't think that Bearer of Heavens is really going to make the cut too often. Unfortunately, it's a neat card, but how to leverage a card like this is just too big of a question, I think, especially with what it's asking that we could pay for it. So I'm just going to give it an F.
Yeah, I gave it a D- because it's better than land 22 or something.
Okay. Did you say land 22?
Yeah.
Jeez, it's an F. Dictate of the Twin Gods. Here's the interesting one as well. Dictate of the Twin Gods is 3 red for an enchantment with flash. Okay, you ready? Hang on, damage dealers. If a source would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage to that permanent or player instead.
So this is for all damage, not just yours.
Yes. A source. It doesn't say you control, just a source.
Right. So I guess we're taking advantage of the fact that this has flash to be like, oh, you're not going to block me? All right, now take double that amount of damage. Or, all right, you're going to block some of my small creatures with your big creatures. Now they're going to trade instead.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like this whole card revolves around the fact that it has flash.
Sure, yeah.
Because I want to play it, and then I want the game to end.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I mean, like, so I can see situations where this card is powerful, and I can, especially because it has flash, and you can kind of take advantage of that. What I kind of don't see is how putting this card in your deck is a good idea. And that, and the reason I say that is because it's not like you can be like, oh, this is a situation where this card is uniquely good. I'm just gonna like reach over here and leaf through my sideboard and now put it in my hand. It's like you have to have it in your deck to begin with, and you might just not see that situation at all. And in that case, you have a dead card, which is a huge drawback. Just having cards in your deck that aren't usually good is a huge problem. And I don't necessarily think that the upside of this is high enough that it warrants the fact that a lot of times you don't even want to cast it.
Sadly, I agree. Now, let's say that you did, like, what kind of a deck does want this?
That's the thing I'm having a hard time figuring out.
Yeah, I mean, is it just a hyper-aggressive deck? Is the answer that simple?
I guess. I guess it's like all of your creatures are small, and that allows them to trade with bigger creatures. And if your deck has like 22 bears in it, like this is probably better than like the 23rd bear, right?
Yeah, I mean, this comes down to a similar spot to what we were talking about before, where I respect the power level. This thing can do things that are just broken in limited Magic. I mean, just stupid broken. I mean, you can end step flash this thing in, attack with all of your creatures, not caring if some of them die, get in for 4 or 6 damage because your random bear and your 1/1 got in or whatever, and then you can like Bolt of Keranos for 6 damage to their face.
Yeah, I definitely think this card can steal games enough that like, you could do it. But I just don't think it's like, I don't think it's like A+ Magic to like put this in your deck. It's not like I just got a 1600 on the SAT or what. I don't even know what the top score is anymore. But it's not like this is not the Grand Prix winning draft deck is playing Dictate of the Twin Gods. That doesn't mean that it's like an unplayable piece of garbage. It's just like I just don't really think that like the type of player that's playing this is going to be like winning, like 70% of their matches or whatever.
Yeah, and I think the reason why you think that is there's a couple of reasons, and they're very good. The first one is going back to all of these dictates. You got to look. The thing affects both players, but you have to be the one to play it. That means 5 mana and a card disappear from your resource pool, and your opponent's like, sure. Like, I use that card and that mana to cast a creature. Like, now I have a really scary creature that I didn't have, and you've got nothing. Like, and so, like, that's a huge downside, and I think that you probably just inherently feel that. I think most people will when they really think about these cards. The other thing that I want to mention is just that it's scary as hell to play this card if you don't just win. Because sometimes they just, like, you play it and you're like, they're like no blocks, and you're like Dictate of the Twin Gods. You take way more than you thought, and they're like removal spell, and you're like crap. So you go to 2, and you're like attack you for 18. It's like whoops. It's just these things do happen with these type of cards. I remember Furnace of Wrath, and a card is scary as hell. I don't know. Like I said, I respect ultimately I respect the power level of this card, and I recognize that it's not. That is something that I should keep in my head, but man, this card's not that great. I just think these dictates have a long way to go before they're like actually good in limited. And it's interesting because my gut tells me that on the whole, the average case scenario is that these cards aren't good enough. I think you probably just shouldn't be playing them. But my God, every time you're at FNM throughout the course of this. And somebody goes, dude, come over here and look at this. It's going to be because somebody casted a dictate like this and just blew somebody out.
Right. And this card actually feels to me like more like an instant than it is an enchantment, because you're not just going to run the dictate out there before you know what's going to happen. Right. Like there's a lot of times you're going to look at in your hand and be like, this is not good to cast here, or I'm not sure if this is good to cast here, so I'm just going to hold it back. Like, you're only going to cast in a situation where you think it's a blowout, pretty much.
Exactly.
Like there's almost. Win. There's almost no value dictate, right? It's like you're going for it or you're not. So, I mean, I just don't think I can predict that I will be in that situation enough to warrant including it in my deck. Not that those situations don't come up, or not that it's not good in those situations. So for that reason, I'm not playing it. Such I gave it an F. But if you did play it, it will win games for you sometimes.
Yeah, and I'm going to take a similar line to what I took with that black spell. I'm going to give it a C. Like. Okay. I think that there's going to be times in decks that want this, and I think it is powerful, but I just don't think it's going to be consistent enough to be, a high-ranking card by any stretch.
Yeah, and I think the place to play it is where your deck is boring and has lots of creatures.
Yes. Like, how good is this with our Borderland Minotaur deck, right?
Yeah,
like, it's just like, bang.
Because kind of what it does is it allows actually every creature to pretty much trade with every other creature. So if that's the case, you just want to have more creatures than your opponent. So if you're playing a deck with tons and tons of creatures, this card's actually pretty good. So there's a situation I would consider it.
You found it.
Got it.
Let's take a look at Eidolon of the Great Revel. It's a rare. It's a red, and it's a 2/2. It's an enchantment creature spirit. Whenever a player casts a spell with converted mana cost 3 or less, Eidolon of the Great Revel deals 2 damage to that player. Ouch!
Now, we already reviewed this card last week, so moving on.
Oh, we did?
Yeah.
When did we do that?
It was in the sign-off.
Oh, right. Okay. I was like, we reviewed it.
So this is a bear. It's kind of weird because it potentially damages both players, which seems like really good in an aggressive deck. Kind of like, unfortunately, is like aggressive decks usually have a lot of cheap spells, so it's more likely to damage you than it's likely to damage your opponent. But I guess if you're putting in your deck, like, you're kind of okay with that. You're just like, all right,
it's more likely to matter
exactly
when it damages your opponent than you.
Right, so it's like, I don't value my own life total as much as you value yours. If this deals 6 damage to me and 4 damage to you, like, I'm going to look at that as a win if I'm playing a very, very aggressive deck. So I think for that purposes, like, if you put this in your aggressive red-white deck or red-blue deck as like one of your 2-drops, I think that's a pretty good use of it.
Good, I like it.
I mean, I wouldn't put this in a more defensive deck probably. So
no, I mean, it's still, like, it feels like if this thing had haste, that would be kind of sweet, but really push it over the top. But it's just a 2/2 for 2 as it sits.
Yeah, and also double red in the casting cost is less likely to be able to play it on turn 2, which is kind of unfortunate. So, all things considered, like, Eidolon the Great Revel, I gave it a C+, but that's like kind of optimistic, being like, this is the perfect deck for it. Realistically, it's more like a C or a C-.
I'm going to give it a C, yeah. What about Harnessed by Force? What does that do?
This is a sorcery for 1 red, and it says, gain control of any number of target creatures until end of turn. Untap those creatures, they gain haste, so it's a threaten effect, and it also has strive, so each additional target costs 2 in a red. So 3 mana for the first, 6 mana for the second, etc. This is actually a pretty powerful threaten effect. I kind of considered, like, Portent of Betrayal, like the 4 mana threaten, to be kind of like a fringe playable or even like slightly good in a very aggressive deck, because it's just a way to close out games. Steal your blocker. Now this thing's coming at you. If it's a big enough thing, like, that's pretty scary. And I really like that this actually gets better and better as the game goes on, because it can just, like, all right, 6 mana, steal 2 of your creatures. That's going to be really tough for you. So I know. I consider Harnessed by Force to be actually like a pretty darn good way to close out games in an aggressive deck, and you usually want to have maybe 1 to 3 of these types of effects in your decks. There's a lot of different forms they can take, but this is a pretty decent one.
Yeah, I mean, I think just the idea of stealing 2 creatures at once that's a game ender.
Yeah.
I mean, because the times when you have your threaten effect and they have just that one pesky thing that's still back there, being able to take it and then attack them with it is just, I think this card is just going to steal games.
Absolutely.
And I love the fact that it's just a threaten straight up, like 3 mana sorcery threaten.
Right. I'd say that just like a normal threaten in an aggressive deck is somewhere like around a C or a C+. And I just really like that the game going longer doesn't necessarily make it worse, because I might draw into the ability to do it twice.
Yeah.
So, yeah. The hard part is getting triple red to steal 2 creatures can be tough in aggressive decks. Especially if you're skimping on lands, you're playing like an 8/8 mana base or something like that. Even if you get 6 lands, you might not have 3 mountains that often.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So that's a little rough, but I just kind of like that. I'm almost always going to have an out in my deck, knowing that if I can, set up the right situation, I can steal your blockers and kill you. This is a really solid deck for an aggressive deck. Really solid card, I mean. So, I don't know. I gave Harnessed by Force like a B-, but it might actually be better than that in a straight aggro deck.
I think B- is where it is. I think that's really just a solid. I just think that, like, you are going to get screenshots from your friends saying, ugh, I finally stabilized, and then this happened. And it's just going to be, he resolved Harnessed by Force with 1 strive.
Yeah, or it's just like you just had like a Centaur and like a Nessie and Asp on turn 4 and 5, and they untap on their turn 6, steal both of your guys. Like, you're probably dead.
You're probably dead. If they had any reasonable start, you're just dead.
Yeah, you're probably dead.
Yeah. All right, let's take a look at the Mythic Rare for red. It's Prophetic Flamespeaker. Scary card. 1 red for a 1/3, which is very weird, right? That's just like, what is going on? It's a red 1/3 for 3 at Mythic. It's a human shaman, but it's got double strike and trample.
So a 1-power trampler.
A 1-power trampler, so it gets even weirder. Double strike's scary, though, right? Once you see double strike, it's like, uh-oh, something good could happen here. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of your library. You may play it this turn.
Yes, you still have to play. You still have to pay all costs associated with that. If you want to play a land, that's still your land drop for the turn. So don't play your land usually before you attack with flamespeaker in case you flip one.
Exactly.
And
if you don't play them, they just stay exiled and go away, and you just don't get to play them anymore, right?
Right. Which is fine. I kind of like to think of cards with like really cool abilities to be like honorary heroes because they're like really good targets for augmentation. So this flamespeaker is totally that because it has double strike and it has trample. So this is like one of the best things you can go big on. Any boost on this at all is going to make it just insane. Even ignoring the fact that it might get you some card advantage along the way.
Yeah, that's the thing that occurs to me with this too. Is just like bestow me.
Sure.
Bestow me, bro. Because once you do, not only is this thing just really scary, but it also generates card advantage, which is just even scarier.
Right, so it makes it especially hard for your opponent to just be like, all right, I'll just take it once or twice and try to find an answer, but instead of chump blocking. And it's hard to chump block even then because it has trample.
Yeah, great with combat tricks. I mean, ridiculously good with combat tricks. Of course, one of the things that maybe we should mention too is the way that double strike and trample work together because they're a fearsome pair when they're together. I mean, if you just give this thing a small bump, it's going to be able to get through most anything. And if they try to put, a 2/2 in front of it or something like that, just to chump block and take nothing, and you pump it up, you're going to get 2 activations off this thing. So
yeah. Kind of unfortunate is a lot of times you'll have to actually use your mana to get it through, which might make it hard to actually cast the spells off it. The turn you bestow onto it's going to be hard to use mana. The turn you cast the pump spell, it might be hard. So it might not generate as much card advantage as you would hope. But I think just being that double strike trampling body is going to be pretty nice to begin with.
Yeah, it's just really, really good. How is it on its own? Like, let's say you never pump spell it and you never bestow it. How good is 1/3 double strike trample with this ability? Still good?
Yeah.
It's basically a 2/3.
Sure. Yeah.
Functionally. So that's pretty good too, right?
Like 2/3 for 3 is a nice baseline for creatures in the set.
Right. So that's even its basement is pretty nice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what do you give it?
I give it a B. I give it a B. I think it's quite good though.
Yeah, I give it a B+. I like the potential. I think it just fits in this format perfectly too. I think there's formats where this would be still very good, but a little bit lower on the rating scale just because there's not as many ways to, you got to remember there's other formats, right, that aren't bestowy, enchantment-y combat tricks in every color and formats, but this one is. So
yeah, and also, gosh, it's just like even if you just play it on turn 3, like if they don't have the right blocker for it right away, it's like, oh, geez, letting you get those 2 free cards the next turn seems really rough.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. I like B+ on that guy.
I'm going to revise B+ as well.
Okay. Spawn of Thraxes is a rare dragon. All right, buddy, we're back on the 7-drop train here. What are you going to give us, Spawn of Thraxes? Are you good enough? It's 5 red for a 5/5 flying. Good start. I like that. But it's not good enough on its own, probably. So it says, when it enters the battlefield, it deals damage to target creature or player equal to the number of mountains you control.
Right, so we're probably looking at 3 or 4 damage.
I'm on board. I like it.
It's a nice prize to attack on. In some sets that would be like a Stone Cold Bomb, and it's really not, even in this set. But I do think that like that definitely like jumps in the realm of like this is a card that I'm pretty happy about.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to paying 7 mana, if I can put a 5/5 flyer on the battlefield and kill a threat of theirs that actually matters, which I do believe I can, I'm on board. I'm playing it. I like this. This is a place I would put 7 mana. Now, the real issue here, though, we talked about that uncommon, that 5 white that we talked about on the last week's show that we were both on board for that, buried one of their creatures in your library. Mm-hmm. Spawn of Thraxes isn't as good in the sense that it doesn't, it might not kill the thing that you really need it to kill.
Right.
But it does go to player's head. So sometimes you just kill your opponent. But the interesting thing is that it's a 5/5 flying blocker, which is really just that will shore up a lot of things a lot of the time. The downside to it is that it's in red. Like, how many decks start off with Satyr Hoplite and end with Spawn of Thraxes that you're really happy with?
A lot of my decks, because I always love the idea of flood insurance, and it's like, so if my deck's maybe fairly aggressive, but what happens if I draw too many lands? Am I just hosed? No, because I might draw this, and then
yeah, that's funny because I'm the similar, but I don't usually go up to 7 mana for flood insurance. I go to 6.
Sure, yeah.
But you would play this in an aggressive red deck and just have it just sit there as not your primary game plan, but as like your fallback plan.
Yeah, probably, because I know that if my opponent does stabilize, I'm drawing to live outs.
Yeah, oh yeah. And this thing can also, like we said, just finish the game. Sometimes it just does like 4 to your opponent's head, and that's all they had left.
Yep. All that being said, I gave Spawn of Thraxes a B-, which is, that's respect, but it's not like love.
Yeah, I give it B- as well. And the reason why it doesn't get a higher grade is because it's 7 mana.
Yep.
Twinflame, what does that do?
This is a sorcery for 1 and a red. Choose any number of target creatures you control. For each of them, put a token that's a copy of that creature onto the battlefield. Those creatures have haste. Exile them at the beginning of the next end step. And its strive cost is 2 and a red for each additional target. So 2 mana for 1 target, 5 mana for 2 targets. You can't target the same thing twice, so you can't just make like 5 mana, 2 copies of my best thing. You actually have to copy my best thing, then my next best thing, then my next best thing, etc.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Which actually is kind of a significant downside for what Twinflame can do. Because it's usually like, so I want to have this cool enters the battlefield effect and get that again, or I want to have this big attacker and get that again. It's going to be pretty tough to actually find a whole bunch of things that you want to copy for like, major effect. So I just kind of looked at Twinflame as like a far inferior version of Harnessed by Force, which is, I want a sorcery speed way to get more attackers, because Harnessed by Force also removes blockers from their side of the board, and Twinflame just creates attackers. So
yeah, this seems like a lot worse.
Yeah, I think it's way worse. There aren't that many cool like enters the battlefield effects in Theros block, so it just doesn't really seem all that abusable to me. I don't know. It's hard for me to figure out the deck that I really want this in.
I don't like this card.
Yeah.
I'm kind of out on Twinflame.
Yeah, I'm kind of out on it too. It's like, it kind of feels like its average case scenario is like, you kind of like target a couple of like 3/3-ish size creatures and you see if your opponent can block them.
Yeah, and it's a sorcery, so you can't get really blowouty by doing it in combat and blocking or doing it on an end step or, some tricks like that. It's just...
Mm-hmm. You also can't target your opponent's creatures, so you can't even like be like, I don't have anything awesome, but you do, so I'm going to copy that. So you have to copy your own awesome things, and the thing about awesome things is that when you have them, you usually win the game anyways. You don't need more of them. So yeah. Twinflame, it's just really asking too much. It's a win more card, as we say, where it's like if things are going great, then it's going to look good, and if things are going bad, it's not going to do anything at all. So. Twinflame, I'm out. Like, I maybe once in the blue moon I'll see a deck where I'm like, maybe this could work here. But for the most part, I think Twinflame is like
you're D-minusing it.
Yeah, I'm D-minusing it. Where it's like, I'm gonna look at it if it's in my pool, but I'm almost certainly not gonna select it.
Yeah, I'm in with that D-. All
right.
Red looks okay.
Yeah, it's not nearly as bomby as black was.
No, I think Harnessed by Force is a scary, scary, scary card, and of course, Dictate of the Twin Gods as well. Let's move on to green.
All right.
The Dictate is the first card for green. It's Dictate of Karametra, and it's 3 GG for an enchantment flash. Whenever a player taps a land for mana, that player adds 1 mana to his or her mana pool of any type that land produced.
All right, some Mana Flare, and I
doubles
guess
up your mana.
Yep, and I guess the downside to Mana Flares is frequently that your opponent gets the first crack at them. And this one, that's not the case because that's flash, so you can do it on their end step, then untap with all your lands and kind of do whatever exciting thing you want to do. Kind of like, I just can't really figure out what I want to do with it because it already costs 5 mana. So it's like, well, how much more mana do I need that warrants me putting this card in my deck and giving more benefit to my opponent? Let's say that I want to cast really expensive stuff. Why don't I just put Market Festival in my deck, which is that like 4 mana enchantment that's like goes on your land and makes the land produce 2 more mana of any color.
Yeah, the double Fertile Ground, yeah.
Yeah, I just imagine that Market Festival is going to get me anywhere I want to go with where Dictate of Karametra would have taken me, realistically and limited. And like we said about Market Festival, it's like it's still hard to imagine how you would use that mana effectively. So I just don't see any situation where I would want to play a Dictate of Karametra.
I don't like it. I want to like it. I don't like it.
Maybe we're doing it with the Colossus.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Like the thing that Brian said is it makes really good sense to me, and it's not to be confused with he can't think of anything expensive to put the mana into. That's easy, but now we're trudging down the territory of playing 2 bad cards to try to make one good situation, and that rarely works out.
Right, yeah, because any game where you only draw one of those bad cards is like you mulliganed.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah, so it's like, all right, I just have kind of a regular deck, a mid-range deck, and I put this Dictate in my deck, and I put the Colossus in my deck, and if I draw them both together, that's pretty good. Like, you probably win that game. But the games where you only draw one or the other, it basically you're starting one card down, and that's a huge drawback.
And of course, the Dictate takes a card. We talked about that. And then on top of it, your opponent gets to just go off as well. I mean, sometimes you can bail your opponent out of a pretty bad situation by playing a Dictate. Yeah, I'm just out on it. I'm just not playing it. I think it's an F.
It's an F for me as well. I'm never casting it.
This next card is not an F. It's Eidolon of Blossoms. It's 2 GG for a 2/2 enchantment creature spirit with Constellation. Whenever it or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card.
All right, so it starts off as Striped Bears, which is just a 4-mana 2/2 that draws you a card, which is already pretty exciting and limited. Just a nice way to keep your deck moving and get blockers or whatever. This one, however, sticks around, generates you so much advantage because like enchantments draw into more enchantments into more enchantments. I don't even necessarily need to build around Eidolon of Blossoms to make it great, even if I'm like 6 or 7 enchantments. Like, I mean, I'm playing this as my only enchantment most likely, but if you get to like 6 or 7 or even heaven forbid like 10, this is going to draw you a lot of cards.
Yeah, it will. I just think this card's super, super cool. I think it's powerful. Does it have a downside? Yeah, it does. You play your Eidolon of Blossoms, and you're not really affecting the board in a meaningful way on turn 4. I mean, a 2/2's not dead by any stretch, but it's not great. So it's not just pure upside, but it replaces itself. I mean, worst case, you could play it chump block, just use it as basically a cycle. And I think this card's just very powerful, and you're going to want to play it often.
Yeah. It doesn't do anything super flashy, but it's going to generate you enough advantage that it's going to swing games. So
yes. So where do you put it? I mean, not super flashy is correct. So it's hard to give it. Like, I don't think it's an A.
It's not an A. I actually kept it just out of A range. I gave Eidolon of Blossoms a B+.
Okay, I'm going to give it a B. Like, I just think it's super rock solid. Great card to try to just grind and get a bunch of card advantage with. It's pretty fragile, I mean, not that there's any downside if they kill it, but it is interruptible. And you do need enchantments, and you're going to have some amount of them, but a lot of your creatures won't be.
Yeah, the worst case scenario on Eidolon of Blossoms is still not bad.
No, it's not at all. In fact, it's actually kind of good.
Right.
Let's move on to Pheres-band. 3 GG for a Hydra at Rare. And it's a 0/0 that enters the battlefield with 4+1/+1 counter. So it's a 5-mana 4/4. And you can pay 2 GG to put X +1/+1 counters on Pheres-band where X is its power.
Yeah, so it's basically 4 mana, double how big this thing is.
Right. Its power. And because sometimes that gets bigger, even without its counters, Yeah. You bestow something or you pump it up for a turn or whatever.
Yeah.
We saw quite a few screenshots from the pre-release of people just going completely nuts with Pheres-band.
Yeah, honestly, I'm not that compelled by any creature that's like larger than 2020. Like, what's the difference? It's like it's not dying in combat, and if it hits your opponent, they're dead.
Dude, we had one guy put a calculator with a math equation on top of his Pheres-band because it was so big.
Basically, all you have to do is cross out the power and toughness and write the Abyss, which is just like this kills the creature every turn. I just don't find it that compelling because it doesn't have trample. Like, I don't care how big a creature is. Like, if it doesn't have trample, it doesn't really matter. Like, so
Brian,
I mean, this card, it still is the Abyss. It's 5 mana. It's a 4/4. It's the Abyss. Like, that's good. I mean, there are limits to how good creatures can be if they don't have any type of evasion or trample.
There are. So where do you put this one? It's an arbitrarily large green creature.
Yeah, it's kind of slow. It's only a 4/4 the turn that you play it, so it has that short window where your opponent could get you with a Lash of the Whip or Rage of Perforos or some other relatively unexciting removal spells. Still good. Puts a lot of pressure on your opponent. Blocks okay the turn it comes down. B+?
I give it a B+.
Okay.
It might be a little better. I mean, it also has the whole threat of activation thing that we like to talk about. You attack with it, even if they've got a blocker, they don't block because, they figure, well, he's just going to spend 4 mana to put the counters on it. If that happens, then they lose their guy. So instead you just get in for 4, or maybe you just pay the counters and get in for 8. Mm-hmm. I think the card's just rawly powerful. I think it's a huge pain to deal with. I think Death Touch is still awesome in this format, and this is another reason why.
Yep.
B+. All
right.
How about another Hydra?
This is Hydra Broodmaster. This is a big one. 7/7 for 4 green. And it has Monstrosity X for XX green. And when it becomes monstrous, you put XX green Hydra tokens onto the battlefield. So kind of what you're looking at here is it costs 6 to play for a 7/7. If you monstrous for 7 mana, you're also going to get 3 3/3s in addition to the 3+1/+1 counters you're going to get. So you're going to turn your guy into a 10/10 and get 3 3/3s. That's kind of like the average case scenario for Hydra Broodmaster, I think. That's a pretty good average case scenario. I mean, like, the only thing I don't like about this card is that it costs 6. That's the only thing I can say about it.
And it's still a 7/7 for 6, just base stats, which is huge.
Right, which is an absolute stop sign the turn that you play it. And you don't even have to feel that bad about risking it in combat, because it's really hard to get them to get their thing up to 7/7. So
that's sweet.
Yeah, it's sweet. And unlike other just big dumb dudes, like, this can actually, like, kind of deal with Death Touchers and the fact that it's going to make a bunch of 3 3s or 4 4s or something like that to help punch through, even if you can't really attack effectively with this.
This is pretty bomby.
Yeah, I think it's bomby.
I would pretty happily pick this. I mean, the difference again between 6 and 7 mana is huge, and this one's on the right side of that equation.
Yeah.
I like this card. As much as it's just a big dumb card, like being able to widen out your board presence and as well as just being very vertical as well. I think this card's just great.
Yeah, I think it's really good. I'd probably give Hydra Brewmaster like an A-.
I'd give it an A- as well.
And when I first pick my Brewmaster, I'm going to be picking any kind of mana accelerators like Golden Hind and Voyaging Satyr very highly, because I want to get up there and start doing this thing as fast as possible.
Agreed. Pheres-band Warchief is next. It's 3 and a green for a 3/3 Centaur Warrior with Vigilance and Trample. And it also has other Centaur creatures you control get +1/+1 and have Vigilance and Trample.
That's actually pretty sweet. I mean, especially you consider that most of the green creatures that I like are already Centaurs. You got the Swordwise, Nylea's Disciple, Nessian Courser. You're kind of in good hands if you're drafting a lot of Centaurs already. Like, it's hard to go wrong with the Centaur. So I think just like you might only have 2 or 3 other Centaurs in your deck, and that's fine. That's still going to make this a pretty solid card.
It's pretty solid on its own, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you're already fine with your 4 mana 3/3 Vigilance Trample. Like, that's already fine. The one thing that I thought was like kind of goofy with this is because it gives your other Centaurs Vigilance, that if you have Pheres-band Tromper, now he can't get tapped, so he can't Inspired. I mean,
non-bow.
I probably won't be complaining too much in that scenario, but I just thought it's like, come on, man, like, stupid Warchief, like, let me tap. I don't know, like, this is cool. Like, if you have, like, you just put this in a green deck, like, you're probably gonna play it every time. It's like a C+.
Yeah, probably. I give it a B-. I mean, a 3/3 Trample Vigilance for 4 is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I like the fact that it can battle and it can also block. I'll give it a B-.
Yeah, I think it's nice body already. Like, even if, like we said, you don't have to be playing dedicated Centaurs. Even if you just have a handful, you're going to be happy.
Yeah. Now this next one, oh man, we've seen some pretty nice Strive cards, but this one's really good. Setaessan Tactics is 1 and a green for an instant at rare. Strive is green. Until end of turn, any number of target creatures each get +1/+1 and gain tap. This creature fights another target creature. Jeez.
Yeah, so this is like an insano version of Pit Fight, which is already like a pretty decent limited card. And this triggers Heroic, and this, like, this is like the perfect set for this card too. Like, it's already a good card, but it's like absolutely maximized in this set. I don't know. Setaessan Tactics seems like a blowout to me.
Yeah, and this is one of the better Strive cards, if not the best one.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, the things to remember are that it's an instant, so you can just use it for value in combat. The Strive cost is super, super cheap, so it's 1G and then G. It is green-centric, but I mean, realistically, like, what's the most you're going to do this for? 3? Maybe
sure.
4? So if you need to do 3 of them, it's GGG1. And since it gives all the creatures +1/+1 and you're already in green, you're probably going to be outclassing whatever your opponent's up to as far as just raw size goes, which is really all that matters here, because you can just end step, fire off Setaessan Tactics on your stalled out board state or whatever and just kill their stuff. And that's just insane. I mean, you could get a 3-for-1 out of this. I could see that happening.
Yeah. I mean, also don't overlook the fact that you don't even have to use the fight effect. You can also, this is, kind of weird, but you can just like use it in combat, right? Like
totally.
It is just a pump spell. You can use it to save your creatures from removal if you absolutely need to. I mean, like this card is not without like some question marks as far as like, well, I need to have creatures out. Like there's that. My opponent's creatures need to not have death touch or be like arbitrarily large. I don't know. Like there's like it like this card isn't a blowout every single time. It's just a blowout most of the time.
Yeah, I think it's just like in the world of combat tricks or Strive cards, this is what I want to be doing.
Yeah, pretty much.
It is conditional though, right? It's cheap and it's instant speed and it's powerful, but you need dudes, you need creatures. Like it doesn't do anything if you don't have any. There's some downside to it. It's not the perfect Magic card, but when it comes to pump effects and Strive cards, this is pretty close to what I want to be doing.
Oh yeah. It's a Mondo, follow the hammer type effect. Still, I kept it out of A range just slightly because if you're just getting hosed in the game, this is not gonna stop them from crushing you. So in any kind of game where it's going reasonably well, it's gonna help you win you the game. But I kept it out of bomb range for that reason. I gave it a B+.
Yeah, I was gonna go A- on this thing. It's hard to give it an A-. It does have a high setup cost like all Strive cards. Yeah, I'll go B+ as well.
Yeah, I mean, like, you compare it to, like, Silence the Believers, and, like, that's a card, like, every time, right? Every time. But, I mean, also this triggers your heroic. It's not just, like, a removal spell. So, a lot of times, this is going to be really, really good.
Exactly. All right, to white we go. Aegis of the Gods. 1 and a white for enchantment creature, human soldier at rare. It's a 2/1, and you have hexproof.
So mostly it's just a bear. Like it's really hard to figure out how often like you have hexproof is really going to matter in limited. I consider that to be more of a constructed ability where burn is more often directed at your face, or like discard spells are happening all the time. In limited, it's kind of few and far between when you actually choose to target your opponent. So I'd say that's more for like corner cases, and it's a nice side benefit, but it's not really why you put it in your deck. Why you put it in your deck is that it's a 2-mana 2/1. You need bears in Theros Limited. This is a bear. It's a C.
It's probably just a C.
Yeah, I think it's like the definition of a C. It's like it's an average creature.
This next creature is not the definition of a C. It is Dawnbringer Charioteers. Oh baby, this card's good. 2 white for a 2/4. Flying
sold
lifelink
sold
heroic. And it's got the sweetest heroic ability, gets +1/+1 counters. It's a rare. God, this card's good. It's just scary good how good this thing is.
Yeah, you could chop this up into many pieces, and you can't make this card unplayable no matter how you divide it up.
No.
It's like it makes a Wingsteed Rider look like a chump. Just like you're starting off like with a hopeful Eidolon on it. Like it's just fantastic. Already with that 4 toughness, going to be hard to kill. It's going to block great the turn you play it. It's if you do go big on it, your opponent must deal with it because it's almost impossible to race that amount of lifelink. I mean, I can't say a single bad thing about Dawnbringer Charioteers.
Yeah, like it's really just that good.
Yeah, even if you don't have that much ways to abuse the heroic, it's still a very solid creature. Still going to be one of the absolute best creatures in your deck. So I gave it an A.
I also give it an A.
All right.
I really do. I just think it's a bomb, just a first caliber 4 mana bomb. I just think it's fantastic.
Yeah, I also want to give slops to WotC for putting this card as a promo that everyone in the pre-release gets automatically if they pick white.
That was too powerful.
Yeah, it just made picking white like too much of the obvious choice. So slops to you, WotC.
Yeah, you got to do better. One thing I do want to note about Dawnbringer Charioteers, and one of the reasons why it's getting an A from me here, is because it fits so cleanly into the strategy that it seems like it would. Mm-hmm. You know, we were talking about that dragon, right? And it's like, God, but it's in red. It's kind of awkward. It doesn't exactly, like, red isn't looking to go long. They're looking to go short game. And now you give me this really sweet 7-drop dragon. It's like, well, it's still really powerful, but, you know, I kind of have a question. Like, I'm kind of scratching my head about it. Dawnbringer Charioteers? No. It's just perfect. It slots in utterly perfectly into the deck that it's going to be good in already.
Also, tell me the deck that can cast this card where this card isn't good.
Yeah, that too. It's 4 mana. That card's so insane.
Like, let's say I'm playing like white-black control with no targeting abilities. This is still a first pick.
It is. It absolutely is. Next is Deicide. 1 and a white for an instant. It's a rare. It says exile target enchantment. Now, there's a whole lot of other text that doesn't really apply to limited. I'll read it in a second, but
that's playable. I mean,
fine,
like we
right?
said,
like instant speed, kill something, maybe.
Yeah, instant speed's pretty important. Exile is probably not that important unless you're killing a god. But
yeah, which I'll read that now. If the exiled card is a god card, search its controller's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with the same name as that card and exile them, then that player shuffles. So that's really not relevant for limited. But yeah, I mean, it's okay, right? It's like a D+ or a C- or something. Like, you could play it. I mean, I'd much rather have like Unravel the Aether, for example.
Yeah, and just kind of on par with the one where you also gain 3 life. They cost 3 mana instead. Yeah,
Ray of Dissolution.
Yeah, if you're going to main deck an enchantment killer, I want it to be instant. Being cheap is a nice side benefit because it makes it more likely to be a combat trick as well. You can main deck a Deicide. Don't be fooled by the fact that it's a rare. It's not a bomb. It's just okay.
Yeah, I think people have been a little excited about this for constructed, just as a sideboard card or whatever. But for us limited players, it's not that good.
No, it's just merely fine, and I wouldn't main deck more than like 1 enchantment killer, so it's like a C-.
Yep. All right. Now this next one is our dictate, and so far, we've had a pretty consistent theme here with the dictates, where it's like, well, 3 of the 4 affect both players that we've talked about, and one of them affects you, but kind of makes sure that you need to have creatures die and do all this stuff. Dictate of Heliod asks a lot less of us. It's 3 white for an enchantment with flash. Creatures you control get +2/+2.
Yeah, this is an insane effect even without flash.
Yes.
Just having this double anthem going on with flash means that I guess it like reduces the groan test from your opponent, because it's when your opponent plays double anthem or like triple anthem, as was the case in like Ravnica block, there's that thing where it's like, oh my god, like how am I gonna deal with this? Like they attack, you're like, geez, I have to like triple block just to kill their kind of lame creature.
2-drop or whatever.
Yeah. You're like, geez, that's awful. At least Dictate of Heliod puts them out of their misery quickly, because they make normal blocks, Dictate comes down, all their creatures die, now they concede. So
that's how you see it.
I like that this card has mercy, just the mercy flash tacked onto it, just to put them out of the misery right away. I don't know. You're gonna win the game most times you cast Dictate of Heliod. You have to have other creatures. Again, not a tall order. Especially in a white deck. White has the most creatures of any color. It's gonna be hard to screw this card up. I mean, I have very little bad to say about it.
Yeah, I think Dictate of Heliod's an A.
Yeah, even if you play Dictate of Heliod on an empty board, you're pretty happy, because it makes any creature you top deck and do like a must kill. Yeah, it's an A. It's gonna be a huge groan test. But like I
just can't believe it's a combat trick as well as doing what it does. Like, that's just so insane. You're gonna get the card back off of it most of the time.
Yeah, like interestingly enough, I don't think adding flash makes it better, but I don't think it actually changes the win percentage of this card in any appreciable manner. It's just so good regardless.
Yeah, card's awesome. Speaking of awesome, this next one's pretty good too. It's Godsend. It's a mythic rare for white. It's 1 white for a legendary artifact equipment. I should say what it costs to equip. Equip cost is 3.
Okay.
Which is a little ouch, right? Like that's a commitment. Equipped creature gets +3/+3.
All right.
Boom. So basically any creature that this thing's on is huge now. Whenever equipped creature blocks or becomes blocked by one or more creatures, you may exile one of those creatures.
All right.
Opponents can't cast cards with the same name as cards exiled with Godsend, which is not super important for limited, but it does come up occasionally. But the main thing is just they cannot enter combat with you.
Right. I mean,
like, what the hell? They can't attack or block you basically if you have Godsend on a creature.
Yeah, I mean, typically, just an equipment giving +3/+3 is kind of putting that creature into abyss range, or it's just like I'm going to take or I'm going to chump block. There's very little benefit to trying to fight with your opponent's creatures that have +3/+3 because it's like even if you kill it, they just move it on to the next thing. So, I mean, I honestly don't think that exiling ability is that much better than it would just be if it was only +3/+3. It's better, but it's not that much better.
Okay, so how good is +3/+3 then?
It depends on what we're paying. So we're paying like a 6 mana investment just to get the first benefit out of this. That's kind of a lot. If your opponent like manages to mess with you a little bit or bounce that creature or remove that creature in response, like that could be a potentially like devastating tempo loss. Obviously like in a long game, this card is going to win you the game. Right, given enough time, like this is gonna, wear them down. You can use it on offense and then move it back to defense or whatever. It's gonna make combat really tough for them. But in a very fast game where like you're racing or your opponent's beating you down, like this is actually like probably like the last thing you're gonna want to play out of your hand. It's actually gonna be pretty awkward and not a very good investment because it is 6 mana.
It's a long game plan for sure.
Yeah, it's 6 mana for your first 3 power and 3 toughness, which is really not a very good deal.
Okay, so I agree. And I think that the interesting thing about Godsend is that it's clearly powerful, right? I mean, you just look at it and it's just rawly powerful. But everything you said is true. It is a risky proposition. There are going to be times when you lose because you go for Godsend. Ultimately, where does it fall, though? Like, does the power level raise it? I mean, you can make any creature into your deck into something just very difficult to deal with.
Right, absolutely. To me, this is not a bomb, and I actually don't think it's that close to a bomb either. I gave it a B. I think it's a good card, but I just think that you'll actually find a lot of limited games where this is just too slow.
What about the games? Like, put it on the quadrants.
Sure. Is it a good play on turn 3? Like, not especially. Like, it could be okay.
Yeah, not great in the developing part of the game.
Yeah, because it's a huge risk tempo-wise. Because you use your 3rd turn playing Godsend. Let's say you use your 4th turn equipping it, and your opponent plays Voyage's End. Like, you're done. Like, like that is awful. Or your opponent just takes the damage and then cracks back at you, and eventually like bounces your guy or sips your guy or something like that. Like, it's a huge tempo cost. So yeah, in developing, I think it's passable, but not especially good, especially if your opponent is curving out. This does not compete well with an opponent that's curving out. Okay. If you're ahead, this is probably going to close out the game. It's just going to provide inevitability for you. Like your opponent, unless they remove this, it's going to be hard for them to win. If you're behind, I think it's actually pretty bad because you can maybe make like one uber blocker, but all right, so your opponent has more stuff than you. You're just still going to get run over. And at parity, where the game's kind of even, you kind of stalled out. This is pretty darn good.
It excels there, yeah.
Yeah, it definitely does. It doesn't like close out the game in a hurry. Your opponent still has time. They can chump block a few times or even take a few hits because, unlike the swords, Sword of War and Peace and Sword of Fire and Ice and all those things, like those things have like an appreciable effect when they hit you. You have to start chump blocking immediately. Mm-hmm. Whereas like Godsend, like all right, I can take a couple hits. Like that's not going to kill me,
right?
So I mean. I did notice that it's not an enchantment, which you'd think it might. Probably just doesn't fit on the type line.
I think that's why, yeah.
So it's not susceptible to a lot of like the incidental removal, which might kill it, which is kind of nice, I guess.
Yeah.
To me, I give it a B, and I stand by that.
I also give it a B. I don't want people to think that this card is just a straight up bomb. It's obviously very good. It has its place, but it is not like setup cost is actually quite high on it, and you have to respect that.
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing against...
Are you pack one, pick one in it?
probably more often than not.
Like, would you take it over the cranes?
I think it's somewhat close. And like, if there was like banishing light or whatever, like I think you take banishing light.
Yeah, removal. Sure.
Like if your opponent's playing a red-white aggro deck, like this card's actually pretty bad. Like you actually would consider siding it out, I think.
Yeah. I think it's good against green. I think green is where you're going to really be able to clean house with this.
Yeah, it's like
you take away the ability, like the fact that they have just bigger things than you do.
Yep.
And I like that. Launch the Fleet is next. It's an interesting Strive card. It's a white mana for a sorcery, and the Strive cost is a colorless mana, which is the cheapest. And it says, until end of turn, any number of target creatures each gain. Whenever this creature attacks, put a 1/1 white soldier creature token onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking.
So this card's a little hard to figure out because, I mean, on one hand, you can see like, all right, you have to attack to make this good. So like already, it's like you're already doing a thing that's like pretty good to make this happen. Doesn't do anything on defense, obviously. Like might just be like a very minor effect, like just getting an additional 1/1 or 2 additional 1/1s attacking, like isn't that great? However, like the best case scenario for Launch the Fleet is actually really, really good, where you're playing heroic, and especially if you have these red and white heroes that like stop your opponent from blocking, like elite skirmishers and arena athletes, that kind of thing. Doing like a Launch the Fleet is just a way to deal 1 million damage to your opponent's face and then untap with a huge army. So, I mean, I do think Launch the Fleet is... It seems really situational, but and like there's definitely decks where it's absolute garbage in, like any type of deck that's like kind of want to sit back. But in a deck that's all about attacking already, I think Launch the Fleet is a decent addition.
Okay. Yeah, I think if we go for the quadrants, it gets quite narrow, right? And it's not good at parity. It's not good when you're behind, and it's not good in the developing. It's good when you're ahead.
Yeah, if you had enough heroes out, it could be okay at parity.
Good point.
Right?
Good point.
Because it is a very reliable way to target all of your heroes.
That's a good point.
In
general, though, it's not, right? I mean, most board states develop such that you have a hero or maybe 2. You know, it's not like your board is like, well, I've got 4 Wingsteed riders and I'm at parity. Like, no, you already killed your opponent probably.
Right.
So.
I think if I was to like throw Launch the Fleet into like M14 or like just some random core set where you don't have synergies, like it's just unplayable. But with all the heroes, I think it's actually pretty good in that deck. So
yeah, I'm not a big fan of it. Like any card that's only really good in one of the quadrants, like is a pretty big hit. It has to be like a game winner. And I don't think this necessarily is.
No, it's not. But it's for a very specific deck.
But put it in a general sense. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you open Launch the Fleet. Like, how likely are you to want to first pick it?
No, this is the type of card where I realize I'm already headed in this direction. This is an okay addition to be like, this card makes me want to play that.
Yeah, that's a better way to frame it, I think. So what kind of letter grade would you give Launch the Fleet?
Like a C-, but like that's being like, all right, it's probably like an F in a lot of decks, but it's more like a B- and or like a C+ in the decks that really, really, really want it.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to give it a D+. Reasoning is just is that it fits the description that we use for D+, which is that it doesn't always make the cut, but sometimes it does.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. Skybind is our last white card. It's 3 white for an enchantment. Now, it's got Constellation, but it's just an enchantment. It's not a creature. Whenever Skybind or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, exile target non-enchantment permanent. Return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step.
So this card isn't like telling you to do any one thing. You kind of got to figure it out on your own. Mm-hmm. It can do a lot of stuff. So you can use it to like break up your opponent's hero. It's like, all right, your bestow things fall off and your hero loses its +1/+1 counters, and like that's probably okay for me. Mm-hmm. You can use it to like reuse comes into play abilities like those supply line cranes. All right, I'll just get more +1/+1 counters. You can use it to get your opponent's blockers out of the way. I don't know. It comes back to the owner's control. You can use it to like even break up a mind control effect. I don't know. This is the type of card that's going to do a different thing every time you cast it. And every time you constellate with it, like you could do different stuff. Is constellate a word? I hope so. It is now.
Constellate, sure.
It is now. It's now a verb. I don't know. Like, I mean, I definitely I like this flicker effect. I mean, I like doing stuff with it. I especially like if it's like tacked on to like a card that I already want to play, like a Flicker Wisp, right? I get like a 3-mana 3/1 flyer that does this, and every time I could find something else cute to do with it. However, this is just like a 5-mana do nothing with this tacked onto it, which to me, like, it's a pretty substantial drop off in power.
This card stinks.
It probably stinks. You know, it feels like the situations where like you really, really want it, it's like probably not going to be the best thing for the job, where it's like I need to break up a hero, like, all right, I'll bring in like Vanquish the Foul or something like that, right? Like this is not going to be the best thing. Or I want to mess.
This thing has a pretty absurd setup cost.
Yeah, or it's like, or I want to mess with your hero. Well, maybe I'll just bring in like Ray of Dissolution and destroy the Bestow thing, and rather than try to like reset it with Skybind. Like,
I want to get tricky with it. Like I like that you listed a lot of the good things that you can do with it. I'm obviously very concerned that those won't come up often enough to justify the 5 mana on the card.
What if you do this with Odunos River Trawler?
Yeah, go off.
Right? Because it's like, return an enchantment from my graveyard, and then play the enchantment, use Skybind to flicker the River Trawler. He comes back, I get another enchantment back. See, now we're talking, right?
Yeah, you got me. A. No, I think Skybind's like a D-.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, we tend to reserve D- for times when it's like, there might be once, right? It's like, it's unplayable, but there might be once.
Yeah.
As opposed to just completely shutting the door on the card altogether.
The thing with Skybind is that it's like a toolbox. It can do many, many different things, which makes it valuable in the main deck, right? Because it's like, but the problem is that like just on raw power, it's probably not there.
Yeah.
And if you're going to use it as if you're going to use it as like a pinpoint accuracy, like I want it for this very specific situation. Like I said, there's probably a better answer you could have brought in instead. Mm-hmm. So it's just hard for me to figure out. I love flickering stuff. It's just I don't think that I'm going to put a 5-minute do nothing in my deck just to make it happen.
Exactly. All right, so that's white. White looks strong as well. All these rares have been very good. Let's move over into the gold and then the colorless and the lands as well.
All right.
The first gold card we have is a Johnny Mentor of Heroes, and he's our Planeswalker for the set, and he's 3 green-white for a 4 loyalty Planeswalker, and of note is that both of his both of his first abilities are plus abilities.
Yeah, you don't see that very often.
No, that's like Elspeth territory only. So, what's her name, Nissa Ravane or something, but. This is a big deal. It means that no matter what, a Johnny's going to be at 5 loyalty when you pass the turn back to your opponent, which is a big deal. 5's a lot. So let's see what a Johnny does. The first one is distribute 3 +1/+1 counters among 1, 2, or 3 target creatures you control.
All right. I like that. So yeah,
it's interesting.
It kind of reads weird, but you can put all 3 on one creature if you want.
Yeah. Interestingly, though, you just can't use it if you don't control any creatures, which I suppose you would just use the other ability.
Right, that's not a problem.
Yeah. So let's read the other ability. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal an aura, creature, or planeswalker card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom and in your order.
Yeah, so that shores up the one weakness that I was seeing with the Johnny, which is like, what if I don't have any creatures in play?
Yeah.
Well, he'll help you go find some. That's pretty.
And aura, creature, or planeswalker. Obviously, the planeswalker is pretty much blank and limited, but auras and creatures are not. Really, creature's the main one here, though, right? I mean, you'll find the occasional aura that you're running, but your bestow creatures count as a creature, so you're just going to be able to get creatures off of it no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, just adding more types it can find makes you less likely to whiff.
Yeah, that's a lot. I think you could... I don't know the math, but I mean, I'm assuming that if you get to look at 4 cards in your average limited deck with, say, 16 creatures, 17 creatures, you're going to be hitting pretty much every time.
Yeah. Don't really need to run the numbers on that one.
It's -8 is a bit absurd. It's the ultimate, of course. It's you gain 100 life. I don't really know what to make of that.
It's kind of weird. It's hard to imagine in limited kind of a scenario where you've been able to like draw a few extra cards and like make your creatures into like giant worms with the +3/+3 stuff, and you still need to do that. I guess it could take your opponent out of like top deck and kill you range.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, here and there, I guess it's like you're at 3 life and you don't want your opponent to draw a lightning strike and kill you. So,
but
sure.
a Johnny seems awesome for limited, right? I mean, you get to start spreading counters around right away. You're going to have creatures. That's just how limited works. I mean, I'm not saying literally every time, but even if you don't, you're going to play a Johnny. Johnny's going to go to 5. You're going to draw a creature off of the thing. Pass a turn back. Johnny maybe takes a hit. Then you get to play the creature plus a Johnny to either make it huge or try to draw another creature. Like, things are going to get out of control pretty quickly. I think a Johnny is, most planeswalkers are, but I think a Johnny is absolutely in that bomb status. Pack one, pick one, windmill, slam it, play it, be happy.
Yeah, it also, I love planeswalkers that protect themselves, and I guess it's contingent on the fact that you have a creature in play, but it's basically like any creature in play is going to get +3/+3, and that's an imposing blocker. Your opponent's going to have to like send some suicide attacks to try to kill a Johnny. 5 toughness or 5 loyalty is quite a bit. Yeah, a Johnny's a bomb. Like, I give it an A.
Yeah, I give a Johnny an A as well. I think he's just great. These gods are a lot less bomby in general. Let's take a look at them. Here's Athreos, God of Passage. These things all are the same, so I'm going to read it on Athreos, and then we're going to assume it to be the same for the rest of them, which is that they're indestructible. They are legendary enchantment creature gods. They're mythic rare, and that the devotion works in such a way that if your devotion to blank and blank, which is the colors that they are, is less than 7, then Athreos isn't a creature, or the god itself isn't a creature. So 7's a magic number. You need 7 colored pips from either of the 2 colors to make these things into a creature. The other thing that I'd like to say about the gods before we dive into them is that when they are a creature, they're unbelievably good. So we're going to be focusing a lot of our review of each of them on when they're not a creature, because the reality is that it's very difficult to make these things into creatures. Like, they don't become creatures very often. I play a ton of limited, and I haven't seen the gods become creatures very often in the time that in all of my drafts. Like, it just happens very, very rarely. And even when they do become a creature, they usually don't stay that way for long. So I'm not playing any of these thinking, well, it's a 5/4 for 3. Of course it's awesome. Like, yeah, right. It is in this case with Athreos, who is a 5/4 for 1 white black. It's just that part I'm not counting on at all. Like, my assumption is that it will never become a creature.
Yeah, I think like 95% of your evaluation is just, would I put an enchantment that does this in my deck?
Exactly. So let's see what this is for Athreos. Whenever another creature you own dies, return it to your hand unless target opponent pays 3 life.
Okay, so
how the hell do you break that down?
It's just going to give you some sort of advantage in a long game, where if the game does go long enough and creatures are trading back and forth enough, eventually your opponent's going to run out of life to pay for it, and that's going to be the final backbreaker, where it's like now all of a sudden they can't kill your stuff anymore. It's kind of a weird card because it does feel like it functions better in a deck that's more aggressive, because when you pressure your opponent's life total, it's going to be harder for them to pay to 3 life. And I find that white-black usually tends to be more defensive, so it's kind of going to be hard for you to really, make your opponent think twice about paying the life.
Yeah, I mean, I love the way it fits into the white-black deck, though, right? Like,
sure.
It sort of almost has that Orzhov from Return to Ravnica block feel, where it's like, I'm not even ever going to attack you. Like, I'm making things that just block all damn day, and you are going to have to come at me, bro. And you play Athreos, and you're like, you're going to attack me because I'm going to block, and you're going to take a ton of damage here. And I've sitting here with my Scholar of Athreos that's been grinding away. I've got my Constellation guy that's done a couple of damage to you. I've got to drain you for a couple with my, Servant of Timuret or whatever. And it's like, things start to add up pretty quickly, and then when you start taking 3 life chunks, it goes really quickly, and they can't really let you have your creatures back because then they can just keep blocking. So I think it's interesting, but yeah, I would much, much prefer to be pressuring my opponent, like you said, and being like, look, do you want to make this trade? And do you want to have to face this creature again? Because neither of these decisions are happy for you.
Right, it feels kind of like the Mogis God of Slaughter, where that card's like, all right, it presents you with a choice: pay life or this bad thing happens to you. But like the God of Slaughter is red black. It goes in an aggressive deck. It's just so much easier to like make those life points add up. Still, I don't know. I kind of do like the fact that if I get my opponent to like pay, 9 life or whatever, all of a sudden it makes like my Grave Merchant and my Scholar like close the game out a lot faster. Would I have won those games anyways? Frequently, yes, probably. I don't know. I think Athreos it's probably okay, and I think the fact that like when you play white-black, you're kind of playing devotion strategy already, and you're kind of playing a lot of blockers and things with high toughness. You're a little bit more likely to make it a creature, right? Because you're kind of doing that anyways. So
yeah, and you are looking to go into the extreme long game, which is kind of where you need to be.
Yep. Yeah.
I like the card. I don't know how good it is.
I think this one's okay.
So here it is. Here's the test. Enchantment. Indestructible. 3 mana. Whenever a creature you own dies, return it to your hand unless target opponent plays 3 life, and it costs black and white mana. How are we coming down on that?
Like a C.
It's like a C? Is that just like, are you just punting? Like, I can't even tell how good this is.
I think
it confuses me.
I think I want to give the card all to C+, and I think it might just be my love for white-black decks rather than my love for this card. And it's hard to see through that, honestly. I'll admit that.
Okay.
Where are you going to go with it?
I don't know. I can't decide. I need to play with this card. I have to play with it before I'll be able to really figure out, like, okay, my opponent can very cleanly play around what I'm doing here since I'm not pressuring them, or where it's like, wow, that added up fast. Like, he just stopped being able to attack me or something like that, It's
kind of hard to figure what is this replacing in your deck, and how good would that thing have been instead?
Yes.
And you have to think about that. That is crucial, right? Like, is this going to get the job done better than a Century of the Underworld? Like, doubtful.
I'm going to say that based on the fact that this seems like an attrition card, and black-white is a pretty attrition-based strategy in the format, that it's going to fit in there, and I'm going to give it a C+ also.
Yeah, I think it's actually like a C.
I hope it's good.
I mean, this is the thing where I think our love of white-black is maybe giving us gray-colored goggles or whatever. I don't know.
White-black equals gray. Erebos got a victory. 2 white-red for a 7/4. All the stuff that we said before. Creatures you control can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures, and prevent all damage that would be dealt to attacking creatures you control.
Yeah, so like Launch the Fleet, this is the card that says, if you want to be attacking is even better than it used to be.
Yes.
This makes attacking like an incredibly good step for you. Like, it's
does.
just it's really hard for things to go too badly for me. So the only thing bad about Erebos got a victory is that it usually does not have its own power and toughness, because it's usually not a creature. So it's not contributing to the amount of damage you deal in a strict like mathematical sense. But you have to be wanting to attack. Like, that's the baseline for whether or not this card is good in the situation you're in. Like, if you want to attack in the situation already, then it's very good. Or if it's like attacking is close to good, then this card's still probably good. But if like attacking is just like, no, attacking's terrible for me right now, then this card's probably not good for you at all.
Yeah, and I think that if we put it on the quadrants, it depends kind of on the developing side of things. At parity, it's quite good. I mean, you can use it to break parity quite easily. When you're ahead, it just completely finishes the game for you. And when you're behind, it just kind of doesn't do anything.
Right. So I'm going to want to put Erebos in a deck that's like, I would lose those situations anyway. I'm going to put Erebos in the decks that are like, I'm going for it. So I think in those decks, this is a very powerful card. So, and when I'm playing red-white, that's kind of how I want to play anyway. So I think it would kind of be a misconception to be like, well, Erebos is kind of good in some red-white decks, but I mean, really, like, all red-white decks want to be aggressive pretty much. So
yep, any good one does.
Right. So the red-white deck wants this. I don't think Erebos is necessarily like a great splash card or something like that, right? Like in my green red or green white deck or something like that. Like, maybe not, but in the red-white deck that's aggro, whatever. Like, yeah, I want Erebos, and I want it pretty badly. So I think it's like a B.
Yeah, I give him a little bit less, but I give him a B-. But like you said, it seems to slot into the strategy pretty well. I'm a little bummed that, like you said, it doesn't actually like boost up the power and toughness or whatever, but it just makes combat impossible for your opponent if they're trying to block.
Yeah, and like, most of the time it's going to be pretty good. There are games where it's like, man, like my opponent came out a little bit faster than me, and this isn't going to help.
Yeah. All right. What about Keranos, God of Storms?
So this is I think another powerful god, but it's operating on a little different axis. So this costs 3 blue and red, and it's a 6/5, conditionally, and it has reveal the first card you draw on each of your turns. Whenever you reveal a land card this way, draw the card. Whenever you reveal a non-land card this way, Keranos deals 3 damage to target creature or player.
Whenever you reveal a land card this way, draw a card.
Right. So it's whenever. So basically, like if you draw a land during your draw step, you get to draw a second card too. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is sweet.
Yeah, or if you draw a spell, you also get to bolt. So these effects are not replacing your first draw. These are in addition to your first draw.
Exactly.
Right.
I love this card. I don't think it's fantastic in the sense that, like, look, it's rarely a 6/5, so it kind of doesn't do anything the turn you cast it. That's a lot of mana to just be like, take the whole turn off. But man, I feel like it really does reward you. You need to be somewhat stable to cast this, but this thing is great in parity situations. It's great if you're ahead. Mm-hmm. It's mediocre on developing. If you're behind, it stinks, at least immediately. Like if you're facing imminent death, this will not get you out of it. If you're a little behind, then it's not that bad. Like, because you're going to get to either start bolting stuff or drawing extra cards, and you're going to be able to take over the game from that position. Mm-hmm. I like it as a finisher. I like it as a, I'm going to play this thing, and now the whole game revolves around this card, because you're going to start killing creatures with it or drawing extra cards, and either way you're going to win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a card that, like, it puts the screws on your opponent. It's like they need to start they need to get their victory plans in motion quickly.
Yes.
Because the game just gets worse and worse every single turn for them.
Exactly. And I appreciate cards like that, but they are a little narrow, right? I mean, this is not the card you want when you're getting your head kicked in. When they're curving out 2, 3, 4, and your turn 5 is Keranos, like, you're probably going to die. Yeah. And that takes a big chunk out of it. But that's also not this card's role, right? I mean, this card's role is to clean up the long game in a way that's incredibly difficult to interact with.
I think, like, it does provide you an avenue from victory from a losing situation. So it's like if you're going to pull a miraculous comeback, I think this card can factor into that, which is like bolt that. It can clean up a lot of messes. Now you have to give it the time to do so, but given just a few turns, like, this can claw you out of it. It's not a do nothing like many of the other gods. They're just like, oh, my creatures like have trample, or it's like stone nothing, right? Like this card does help. It's not an immediate help, but it will add up and dig you out of that situation if you have enough time.
That's a good point, because I think that if you break down all situations where you are behind, sometimes you're a little behind. You're taking 2 in the air from some bird or whatever that you can't deal with, and you're getting chipped away at, all the way down to they have lethal on board and you don't have anything to block it with, and there's really nothing in the set for 5 mana that's going to get you out of that mess, right? Mm-hmm. Keranos is good in about, just off the top of my head, like a third to a half of those situations where it's like you're either a little behind or you're medium behind, and he can definitely dig you out of that scenario. If you're way behind, he's awful, like just a complete blank.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
I mean,
I like him though. I do. I think he's powerful enough, and I think that you can play the earlier part of the game in such a way where you're aggressively trading off your cards and just making sure that you conserve your life total. Because again, I really feel like Keranos is just inevitability. Like, I don't see how, if the game goes for a long time, you really lose once you get him on the battlefield.
Right. Exactly. And I think Keranos is one you could consider splashing for, because it does kind of play along a blocking and extended game strategy, which makes kind of a greedier mana base more effective, because you're kind of planning for that anyways.
Yeah, and I think that's really important that you said that too, because blue-red probably not the best.
No, I mean, definitely has been getting better than it was in Triple Theros, but not the most exciting combo.
I give him a B-.
All right, I'm gonna give Keranos a B+. I'm on board with this Storm God.
Okay. I mean, I really like him, but I just got to be careful just to remember that he's also a 5-drop that doesn't do anything. That's kind of a big deal.
Fair.
Kruphix, God of Horizons, is 4/7 for 3 green blue, and you have no maximum hand size. Meh.
Yeah.
If unused mana would empty from your mana pool, that mana becomes colorless instead. Asterisk, that doesn't fit on the card. It does not empty from your mana pool. And I realize that the rules say that. It's just I feel like it should say that on the card just for understanding's sake. Anyway, like this seems lame.
I hate it. I think I really despise this Magic card.
It's just an F, right?
Yeah, it's enough. Like
when is this ever good? You're not going to have cards you're not going to have the type of card draw available where you're going to be able to I've got 12 cards in my hand. I mean, if you have 5 cards in your hand when you cast Kruphix, you're either dying the next turn or you're in great shape. Mm-hmm. You're not getting up above 7.
Yeah.
Keeping all your mana, there's no real way to fully abuse that.
Yeah, it's not for limited, and the upside of this card is actually that it's a creature sometimes, so you get a 4/7.
And
that's the upside.
4/7? Yeah.
It's like a conditional 4/7 in green, which could just get regular 4/7s or something equivalent pretty easily.
I'm just so out on this.
Yeah, I'm out. F.
All right, Pharika, God of Affliction, 1 green black. Now Pharika is a 5/5, but geez, a second 3 mana god here in this last little cycle is pretty sweet. And the special ability, again, Brian, there's a new Magic card. Oh, really, Marsh? Great. Why don't you read it to me? Okay. It's a 3 mana indestructible enchantment that says, and I'm, purposely leaving off the rest, green black, exile target creature card from a graveyard. Its owner puts a 1/1 black and green snake enchantment creature token with death touch onto the battlefield. What do you think?
I've seen better cards. Yeah. It does resemble a card in Magic's history that has been incredibly good, Necrogenesis.
Necrogenesis, yeah.
Which is, that allowed you to spend 2 mana, yank a creature from any graveyard and get a 1/1. You did not get Death Touch, which is a significant difference. Probably this card's a little more challenged because Shard's Block, where Necrogenesis came from, was a little more grindy. There was a lot longer games. You could really make it happen. In Theros, sometimes the games are like that, but they're not always. Sometimes you just get beat down, and it's a little hard to make this happen. Also, really not. I mean, you can exile stuff from your opponent's graveyards, but they get the 1/1, so that's not really a factor. So it's really your own stuff has to be dead. That's pretty significant. I do think this plays into the green black deck, which is you're already you're not really built around self mill and that kind of stuff, but they have incremental advantages already. So this kind of plays into things that you're already trying to do. If the game does go long enough, just getting an army of 1/1 Death Touchers is pretty good. I think Freak is pretty good against any deck that's either not incredibly fast or just flying over your head. If those conditions are met, I think Freaka will take over the game and probably win you the game.
Okay. Of course, I don't know if we specifically called it out, but it's the owner of the creature.
Exactly, right. So if you exile stuff from their yard, they get the snake. So that's no good.
So you don't want to do that. So don't do that unless they're going to be bringing back something that's better than a 1/1 Death Touch snake. And there's nothing better in this format than a 1/1 Death Touch snake.
Right.
Okay, so you think it's pretty good?
I do think it's pretty good. And
those are real cards. Right?
Yeah.
That's, I think, the bar is all right, we're going to spend our 2 mana and exile a creature. And what are we getting for it? Are we getting a card worth of value? Yeah. In fact, there's 2 different cards in this set that actually see play, or in this block that see play, that are exactly that.
Right. Yeah. The other thing this Freaka has going for it is that green and black are both the devotion colors, which means you're kind of already trying to do devotion as well, and your creatures usually have really high toughness. So this is the most likely god to come online in the block, I think. This god seems to me this is the one that's going to be a creature more often than any other god.
Okay.
And it only costs 3. Could be a 5/5. Basically I think this is a card that's going to be pretty good unless they're flying over or unless they're super fast. So I could side it out in those situations. In all those situations, I'm very happy to have it.
First pickable?
Probably not. If you do, it's because you want a mythic. So I think it's a B- or a C+.
I give it a C+ myself. I think that's a perfectly fine enchantment. I think that you really nailed it on the head when you said that the difference between a 1/1 and a 1/1 with Death Touch is massive. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, there's decks that just are wow, can't really deal with this now.
Oh, I think against against an enemy green-black deck, you probably can't lose if you play Pharika. Like, that game is just brutal for them.
That is a savagely bad situation for them.
Yeah.
All right. That's it for the gods, but we do have another multicolored rare. It's called Revel of the Fallen God, and it's pricey. It's 3 red, red, green, green, 7 mana sorcery. You get 4 2/2 red and green satyr creature tokens with haste.
See, this card should have been Bearer of the Heavens.
Why? Oh, God.
Because it makes 2/2s, Marshall. Get with the program.
Sorry, I'm one step behind your bear puns.
Jeez. I don't even. Like,
this card's not a real card, right?
It actually does a lot.
I mean, 2, 4, 8 power and toughness with haste is a big deal.
It is. I mean, if
it's 7 mana.
If you resolve this card, that's probably pretty good for you.
That is a big game.
Maybe
this is a real card, especially because it's in green and you can ramp.
I think it is a real card.
Okay.
I'm not really going to want to build around it, and I don't think it's significantly better than most of the other 7-drops. But this is not a do nothing 7-drop. This is a do a lot 7-drop.
This is a do a lot 7-drop. That's true.
And also could stabilize a board state for you against red white and some of these other aggressive decks, where other 7-drops might just get overrun because they have too many things out.
Okay.
So yeah, I actually think this is a real 7.
But that said, it's like a C.
Yeah, I give it a C.
Yeah, I think C's good. One artifact, Hall of Triumph. It's legendary. Shouldn't matter, but it is. It's 3 colorless. As it enters the battlefield, you choose a color. Creatures you control of the chosen color get +1/+1. So we've got a sort of an anthem that you can choose.
Yeah, I think that's... So I mean, I don't play monocolor in limited unless I have a very, very good reason to. You're just giving up too much power, for not enough benefit, even with the cards like this. Just kind of a self-anthem, if it worked for all your creatures, is pretty good. Not necessarily insane.
But quite good.
But good. Yeah, good. So I think Hall of Triumph is okay. If my deck is 50-50 split, I might not want it. But if my deck is 70-30 split on which creatures I have, then I'll probably play it.
Okay.
If my deck is I don't know, whatever, 80-20 or 85-15 or whatever, then yeah, sure, it gets up to pretty good status. But so it's really hard for me to tell you how good this card is going to be for you. If you're the type of person that likes drafting monocolor decks in limited, then this card's probably pretty good for you. You should take it. You should do your thing.
Yeah.
That's not a thing that I'm going to be doing very often, if at all. So, if you're that guy, yeah, go for it. Where do I give it a grade?
Yeah, how are you first picking this card?
No. It's C+, C, I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, I'd give it a C+. 3 lands. Two of them I'm just going to take care of right away. Temple of Epiphany, Temple of Malady. We've seen these. These are just the finishing off the temple cycle. They're quite good in limited. I take them pretty highly, actually.
Yeah. just
for value. Like, as long as I share at least one color with them, I'm pretty happy to have a Scryland in limited.
Yep.
Yeah, and they're the same. Yeah.
Yeah, even with one color, you have only one color, that's playable, and actually, like, definitely you would put that in your deck. That's like a C. If you're playing a two-color deck and you have the right temple, then that's more like
B minus.
C plus, B minus.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, and if you're playing like a three-color deck and you're splashing or something like that, and you need the fixing even more, that's up into like B minus range or something like that.
Yeah. So temples are good. Don't overlook them. They're not great, but they're good.
Right.
And then our last land is Mana Confluence, which is just a regular land, and it's tap, pay a life, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool.
All right. So, I mean, paying a life to make mana is a huge deal.
I think people are kind of casually overlooking that.
I mean, in like a constructed format where like every spell you cast is going to be very powerful, or you just play decks that don't care about your own life totals. You know, maybe you play against a lot of decks that don't have creatures, so like that's fine. But or you're playing in cube draft or whatever, and you're going to try to tinker out a Colossus on turn 2 or whatever. Yeah, that's great. I don't care about paying a life. But in actual limited, where everyone's playing creatures, everyone's attacking you, Paying life a turn is a huge deal. This land cannot make mana without paying life. It doesn't have a tap for colorless or whatever that doesn't cost you life. You have to pay life every time you tap it. So if this is one of the lands in your opening hand, and you need to play it on like turn 2 or turn 3 to start making mana, this could deal 5 or more damage to you over the course of the game, that's a lot. That's
a big deal.
That's a big deal. So just right off the bat, like in a 2-color deck, I'm not even considering Mana Confluence. Like that's out. Like definitely out. I think when I get to a 3-color deck, I would start considering it, and I'd be like, man, I really wish I had almost anything else to fix my mana instead. But if you started to get to like a 4-color deck, I guess I'm like, yeah, all right, I'll play Mana Confluence. I don't know. Where are you at on Mana Confluence?
I keep thinking about like Chromanticore or whatever. Like this is where my brain goes, though, is like, under what circumstances would I need to play Mana Confluence? That's what I'm asking myself. Because, right. I mean, I can also see scenarios where it's like, you play your first 3 or 4 lands of the game that aren't Mana Confluence, and then it's your last land, and then you don't have to tap it necessarily every turn. But, man, I love using up my mana. Like, that's why I play. I mean, I'm all about just using up my mana every single turn, and Mana Confluence really makes that, it kind of punishes me for wanting to do that. I think that just your average 2-color deck just doesn't want this card.
Oh, definitely not at all.
Yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of people aren't. I think a lot of people are like, oh, it's fine. Oh, you pay a couple life, whatever. You pay a life, whatever. No big deal. It fixes your mana, but it's a big cost. And I think that only when I'm thinking about the greediest builds that I will have built will I actually want to main deck mana Confluence, especially in a deck that supports aggressive decks like this format does. In a format that supports aggressive decks like this format does. It's like, you just can't. I just don't see how you can really keep, maybe a reasonable 2-lander and one of the lands is Mana Confluence and just consign yourself to taking 5-6 damage off of it.
Right. I don't even think Mana Confluence is better than like Unknown Shores in any deck. Like I don't even think there is a deck where Mana Confluence is better than Unknown Shores in Limited. Like it's a tall order. So, and especially you consider decks that want lots of colors of mana usually want the game to go long, which means they're kind of like more on the blocking and controlling side. It's just like, it's brutal to take that much damage in a deck that wants to try to stay alive and extend the game. So right. It's like this type of mana fixture is for like aggressive decks that have a greedy mana base, and in Limited you don't see those very often.
Okay, yeah. So pretty low grade here for Mana Confluence. Was it like a D?
Yeah, it's
D
like
minus maybe?
Something like that, right? Like it's in the D range where it's almost certainly going to be on my sideboard.
Yeah, like I feel like the deck that wants this, you'll know.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. You'll know. You're like, welp.
I don't think I'll be that happy about it.
No,
because I'll be like, man, I really wish I had picked up some better fixers along the way.
Yes, exactly. And there's plenty of good fixing around too, so that you don't need to have a card like this.
All right, grade and D, whatever.
D. Yep. All right, that's gonna do it. That's it. That's all of them.
Oh, that was a lot easier than the common show.
That was a lot easier and really fun, too, because there's so many crazy cards in here, and they're much harder to evaluate on the whole as well. It's kind of like, I feel like when you and I attack a new Magic card, it's all about cutting down to the heart of it, right? Getting down to the nitty-gritty of, like, what is the question we need to answer here to see how good this is, or if we're playing it, or where it belongs, or whatever. And with these, sometimes it's not like these, like God, like Athreos, I'm still just like, I don't know. Like, I gotta play with or against that thing before I really know how good it is and how it really works in game. Because I can be just like anybody and be best case scenario guy and see an awesome scenario, or I can be like me and be like, well, no, this actually isn't that good, and go the other direction. But I know that the truth lies in between somewhere, and I just don't know exactly where that is on average.
I also like the fact that there are some interesting cards that make me actually warp how I build my deck, like King Macor or whatever. I'm just like, I'm going to try to abuse that as much as possible. It feels like this set actually has some kind of build around me stuff, and I've been really hankering for that in the block, and finally get some like that, or Eidolon of Blossoms, or stuff where you feel like I'm going to do it, and That's exciting.
Yeah, I'm going to build around Dawnbringer charioteers.
That'll be a hard one.
All right, that's going to do it for this week. If you guys want to send us any feedback via email, it's lr@lrcast.com. If you'd like to follow myself or me or however I'm supposed to say it on Twitter, I am Marshall_LR and Brian is Brian_LR. It's a great place to ask questions, get in touch, just kind of keep tabs on what's going on with the show and what's going on with us. I've been posting some more content on the Limited Resources blog, which you can find at lrcast.com. Some polls, some questions, some fun stuff there just for, this little quick hit you can pop in. I've put some pictures of some of my cube picks and then had people vote on them, and there's been some interesting choices there. A few blowouts, a few close ones, that kind of thing. So yeah, for all things Limited Resources, please do check out lrcast.com. With that, we thank you for joining us for our journey into Nick's Rare and Mythic Rare set review, and we'll see you next week.
Sorry, Marshall. This is a little awkward. I didn't prepare a sign-off this week.
Why?
I procrastinated too much.
Why?
I've been spending a little too much of my time playing Diablo 3 lately.
Why?
Well, because it's gotten a lot more fun after the expansion pack was released.
Why?
Because it feels good to be making progress again.
Why?
Because it's a lot easier than making progress in real life.
Why?
Because, real life doesn't have clear-cut goals like games do.
Why?
Because in real life, you have to decide for yourself which goals to pursue.
Why?
Well, because we are in an unprecedented time in human history where we have a lot of time to commit to non-survival activities.
Why?
Because advances in agriculture and infrastructure have made food and shelter secondary concerns for many in the Western world.
Why?
Because global trade allows for specialization and increased efficiency of production.
Why?
Because if you don't have to learn many skills, you can master a few, and using currency, trade goods and services that another has mastered so that both parties profit in terms of labor expended.
Why?
Okay, because let's say that you can harvest 4 mangoes per hour, but your friend Woody can harvest 8. Also, you can harvest 6 coconuts per hour, but Woody can only harvest 3. Now, instead of spending half your day harvesting mangoes, you can spend your entire day harvesting coconuts and trade excess coconuts to Woody for mangoes, representing a net gain of... You know what? I'm not going to do the math. Have you not figured it out by now? This is the sign-off. I just did my sign-off. Stop asking why.
Why?
For the love of Heliod.